Good morning. This meeting of the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission will now come to order. Today is Friday, December 9th, and the time is 9:36 a.m. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll begin with roll call. Vice Chair Freeman.
Here.
Vice Chair Herrera. Commissioner McNulty.
Here.
Commissioner Sturts. We have a quorum. We are expecting Vice Chairman Herrera a little later, and I don't think Commissioner Sturts can make it today. Other folks around the table include our mapping consultant, Willie Desmond and Ken Strasma. We have legal counsel, Joe Roth and Bruce Adelson. And other staff in the room include Christina Gomez, our Deputy Executive Director, our Chief Technology Officer, Buck Forst, and I think that's it for staff. And then Marty Herder is our court reporter, taking an accurate transcript of today's proceedings. So we'll go ahead and move to the next item on the agenda, which says presentation on the draft congressional and legislative maps by members of the Arizona State Legislature. We did that earlier this week on Wednesday. So number 3, discussion direction to mapping consultant and possible action regarding adjustments to draft congressional districts and possible action regarding adoption and certification of final congressional districts. The next item, of course, is the same thing, but for the legislative map. And I will defer to our mapping consultant to let us know what they'd like us to start with. We gave them some direction yesterday, and Mr. Desmond can let us know what they were able to accomplish last night.
Okay, so the only new change I have for today is a slight modification to the LD26 change. And that was to just grab that last 900 people in the Dobson Ranch area. I printed out during the break yesterday and distributed the change reports for the Sholo-Winslow switch, along with the Arizona Strip portion, so we could rediscuss that if you like. And then we also, we have plenty of time, so if there's any other scenarios you'd like to explore, we could do that. And then if there are future modifications you'd like me to start working on this weekend, we could discuss that. But if it's all the same, I guess we should just start with the LD26, the report you have in front of you.
Just a question. With regard to the Sholo change, you were going to have one map, and maybe you did this yesterday on the change report, where the Colorado City stuff and the Sholo was all on one map, I thought. Is that
yes,
right?
And that I did distribute yesterday.
That's the one. Okay.
That's the one. So those 3 changes are all reflected in that change report, and we can go over how that looks.
Okay, good.
If you'd like to start there, or if you'd like to start with Legislative District 26.
Yeah, let's start there.
Okay.
Which document are we being referenced to again? Is it VRA LD26 version 3?
No, that is, it's titled Winslow Sholo Arizona Strip.
I think it's
Okay.
I distributed it yesterday. I do have an additional copy here. If anybody needs it, I can. I have two copies if anyone needs it. The districts that are affected here are districts 5, 6, and 7. District 5 takes on 10,503 people, moving its population deviation from negative 2.1% up to positive 2.8%. District 5 is not a voting rights district, so has not, there's nothing we really need to report there. District 6 goes from a population deviation of plus 1,762 people to a negative deviation of 920 people, or positive 0.8% to negative 0.4%. And then District 7, which is the voting rights district, goes from a population deviation of about 2,700, a negative 2,700, to a deviation of negative 10,574, or 5%. That is a voting age, or a majority minority district. It's the Native American district. The voting age Native American percentage goes from 61.9% up to 62.4%. The total Native American population goes from 63.7 up to 65.2, a gain of 1.4 percentage points.
Do you mind showing us on the map the changes?
Sure. So the first change is this section, Mojave County, is clipped out of District 7 and added to District 5. Basically, this is kind of following the direction that Mr. Adelson had given us, that removing non-Hispanic white voters can be beneficial to the voting rights districts. Additionally, District 7 loses some areas here, specifically Winslow and Winslow West, and some of the unincorporated areas surrounding it. Joseph City started in District 6 and remains in District 6. So these are the only two census places that move. In order to equalize the population, Show Low is then added into District 7, keeping it with Pine Top Lakeside. So that those are the three changes.
Mr. Adelson, do you have any thoughts on the majority minority district and what it does to that?
Madam Chair, I think as we had started to talk about this yesterday, in the percentages and the metrics that the Department of Justice will look at under Section 5, the metrics are favorable as far as population. I think as you go further down and look at the results of some of the elections, like the 04 presidential, 06 Secretary of State, and 08 presidential, and the mine inspector, there is some difference as far as effectiveness. Although the minority candidate of choice continues to win in those 4 elections, the margin of victory has declined. The margin of victory is not that significant statistically. The key factors in population are as you know, the VAP, voting age population, the overall Native American population. These are changes that typically is very important to get the input of the affected minority community. In this district, it would be the Native American community. So one of the things we had talked about yesterday was seeing what the population is in Show Low, for example, to see how that, what the demographics are as far as the racial makeup of the community.
I can show you those numbers right now. So in Show Low and Wagon Wheel, in the areas that are also affected. There's a Hispanic voting age population of 10.4%, a non-Hispanic white percentage of 84.31%, and a non-Hispanic Native American percentage of 3%.
Madam Chair, does this change report, does this also reflects moving Winslow from, is that from District 7 to District 6?
Yes.
Can you do the population for Winslow too, please?
Yep. All right, so this change, which isn't quite everything, but I don't think these areas have any population. There's 10,000 people. Of that, it has a Hispanic voting age population of 30.1%, or 31%, basically. A non-Hispanic white percentage of 38.5, and a non-Hispanic voting age Native American percentage of 21.7.
Thank you. You know, this is a good example of comparing the demographics of two communities that, of course, are very relevant to this change. You have one community that has a very large non-Hispanic or Anglo, non-Hispanic white or Anglo population in Cholo, and the Window Rock, I'm sorry, not Window Rock. Winslow has a population that's lower non-Hispanic white and higher in Native American. So one of the things that Justice would look at is, does the swap, does that dilute minority voting strength, which here would be Native American voting strength? Does the swap reduce, hinder, weaken, or diminish minorities' opportunity to elect candidates of choice, meaning that Native Americans' opportunity to elect candidates of choice? The electoral margins in 4 of the 5 demonstrated races did decline with this change. As I said, the decline is not that significant. This is one of those changes in a way that could be on a tipping point, in a sense, that if minorities in the district argued strongly that this dilutes their voting strength and they are concerned that the change may impair their opportunity to elect over the next decade, that is something that Justice would look at quite seriously and then do the analysis to determine whether or not they agree with that point. But this is a very good example, because the minority populations in both municipalities are so different, of exactly what Justice will do in determining retrogression, whether intentional or accidental, in swapping these two municipalities between this district and District 6.
Thank you. Mr. Strasma, do you have anything you wanted to add to this?
Yes, if I could, hearkening back to yesterday's conversation where we discussed the fact that there's only the one Native American district, so that bumping up its percentages didn't really raise packing issues because there wasn't the ability to make a second district. And you know, Mr. Adelson, is my understanding correct from yesterday that this does appear to be very solidly an ability to elect district with and without those changes?
Well, I agree. I think that draft District 7 with the percentages, just putting aside what we have today, does appear to be a very favorable district. I think that when I said that this is on the margin, as far as swapping these municipalities. This is not a situation where you go from 60% ability to elect in the metric elections to 45%. So the difference is not overwhelmingly significant as to reveal clear retrogression. But because there is a reduction in performance, even though there is an increase in the proportions of Native Americans, for example, voting age and total population, this is something that if this stood, for example, and hypothetically if the commission approved this, this would be something that justice would think a lot about, because under the regulations, if the regulations talk about any reduction, diminution, or weakening of minorities' ability to elect. And although the margins are strong as far as electoral performance, it is something that they would take a second look at, particularly if the minority community in the district opposed the change. But I do agree with Mr. Strasma that this does appear to be a strong district. That's why it's a difficult issue in the sense that there is some reduction. This could be determined in part by what the minority community in the district had to say and whether or not justice agreed with them as far as the swapping of municipalities.
Madam Chair.
Sure.
Mr. Adelson, so is the regulation a diminution against anything that might have been possible, as distinct from a diminution against the benchmark?
Madam Chair, Commissioner McNulty, goes to the heart of the issue. The regulations have been strengthened in part because the Voting Rights Act was strengthened in 2006. This would be something, if I were sitting in the department today and this was presented to me, and assuming, and this is a very significant caveat, that the minority community had a very strong opposition to this, this would be something that I'd have to look at a lot. Now, I can't say that in the end it would or would not be a cause for a question, but because there is a reduction, even though it's slight, if the minority community weighed in heavily opposing the change, then this would involve at the department additional discussion and analysis. It's hard to say in the end necessarily what the decision would be. I think that would be somewhat implicated in part by perhaps the rest of the map and perhaps other metrics that the department would look at. But this would involve additional conversation. If this had been presented to me, I would call the minority community in the district and speak to as many people as possible who, assuming they objected to this, in addition to perhaps analyzing a couple of other elections to see whether there's any significant difference. But in the end, because the electoral performance is still strong, this is not something, as I said, where the electoral performance goes from being able to elect to not being able to elect, which is a significant consideration. So this would definitely involve other conversation, but as I said, one of the key factors here is what does the minority community in the district think about this? That is a very significant point that the department would look at.
Other comments from other commissioners? Mr. Freeman?
And just so I understand the change report reflects two changes. One, the Winslow-Sholo swap, and two, the removal of the portions of Mojave County north of the Colorado River from that proposed LD. So, and I would think that the slight uptick in native voting age population is probably attributable more to the losing of the population in Mojave County. I mean, is that something justice is going to look at? They're going to, because one change perhaps masks the effect somewhat of another change.
Well, Commissioner Freeman and Madam Chair, I think that's an excellent point in that the demographics in the Colorado River area are very heavily non-Hispanic white. So I think that the department, I'm completely confident that the department would be very favorably disposed to that change. Also, the move of that community back into Mojave County I know is favored by the people who live there. So that that change would be viewed differently in the sense that there would likely be no minority opposition to the change because, excuse me, because of the demographics of that area. So that I take your point that is a different type of issue in that there would not be any likely minority opposition, Native American opposition, to moving the Colorado community back into Mojave County.
Yeah, Mr. Desmond, yesterday you presented the change report that removes the non-reservation portions of Mojave County, right? And it was just those in isolation, so we could see what those changes did to District 7
Correct. District 7 and District 5.
and 5, right? So, what are your thoughts, Mr. Strasman, Mr. Adelson, on proposed changes for further evaluation with regard to this?
Madam Chair, I think as we had talked about yesterday, I'm very supportive of moving the changes that the Commission wants to consider to the next step for analysis, because whatever changes are being considered will have to go to that next step, even if the changes, the Commission decides eventually not to consider certain changes. So my view is to take a less conservative approach when it comes to submitting things for analysis, since it will have to be done anyway. If this is something that the Commission wants to consider, then I certainly would endorse going to that analysis stage. I think what's also important is that, given that, to entertain, as the Commission has been doing, comments from people in the community that may be helpful in deciding what direction to eventually go. But I certainly endorse what Mr. Strasman said yesterday about getting the additional analysis that we would need to meet our burden.
And I would second that, if the Commission supports this change, I think it would be good to submit it for further analysis and make this change part of the working map going forward.
Ms.
Madam
McNulty?
Chair, I think we have representatives of the Navajo Nation here today, and I wonder if it makes sense to reserve a final decision on this until we've heard from them. Mr. Adelson is telling us that it's going to turn on their perspective, or it may well turn on their perspective, and we may have others here who have comments about this district also. I think we also wanted to include the Schultz flood area, or wanted to consider including the Schultz flood area in LD6, and as I look at that change report, that doesn't have any significant consequence from a minority standpoint, so we may want to include that also before we submit this district for analysis.
The one thing to keep in mind there is that would remove a few thousand more people from District 7. With these changes, District 7 is becoming even more underpopulated. It's at 10,574 with these changes. I think it would probably be somewhere around 13,000, 14,000 with that change. So the deviation would grow more. If you like, I can prepare that quickly and just show you what that would do to the total population. I won't have the full change report, but I can show you how that would work.
I think that would be helpful.
Sure.
Others do.
That's fine.
Looking at an earlier change report while this is thinking, it looks like moving the Schultz flood area moves roughly 2,400 people from District 7 into District 6. This would put District 7 at a population deviation of about 13,000 people. I believe that's about 6.5%. So that's just one other thing to consider with that change.
But that move doesn't have significant Native American population. Is that correct?
Moving that area from District 7 into District 6. Actually, it increases the Native American percentage of District 7 by about 0.7%, or 0.7%. Of the 2,400 people that are moved, 1,850 are non-Hispanic white. So it is a largely non-minority group of people in that affected Schultz flood area. So the change would just further increase the Native American percentage in that district.
I see Mr. Edelson nodding.
I know.
Seems like a good thing.
Commissioner McNulty, Madam Chair, I think I'm going to have to hide under the table. But this is also, let's look at this compared to the other things, the changes we're talking about, just as far as population. This is similar to the Colorado River community move, where the population is overwhelmingly non-Hispanic white. So from a retrogression standpoint, this really does not appear to be retrogressive. Like the Colorado switch, because the population is overwhelmingly non-Hispanic white and the Native American population in the jurisdiction, in the district, increases. So if there's no tie to retrogression or potential retrogression, that this is not something that the department would be concerned about, because it doesn't relate to issues within the department's Section 5 review jurisdiction.
So just to confirm, it does move about 2,450 people from District 7 to District 6. Of that 2,450 people, there's a voting age population of 1,846. That is 159 are non-Hispanic, or are Hispanic. 1,440 of the 1,850 are non-Hispanic white. So this change does remove a higher percentage of non-Hispanic white voting age people than the District 7 is.
Does that include all of the Schultz flood people?
This is the narrow one that we prepared. It includes all of the people, but not all of the land.
Okay, any comments or questions from commissioners on this? I think Ms. McNulty's suggestion to maybe take some public comment now might make some sense. We've got a number of sheets, and there is a lot of interest in this area, and we could use some guidance from folks impacted, and so if that sounds good, I don't know, Mr. Freeman, do you agree? Okay. Okay, why don't we do that? Let's see what time it is. It's 10:09, and we've got about 10 sheets right now. So let's just go through some of these, and then we'll see where we want to go afterwards with this LD7. Richard Lunt, Chairman, Greenlee County Board of Supervisors.
Richard Lunt, L-U-N-T.
You're a professional. You know to spell your name in the microphone. I meant to say that beforehand. When you come up to address the commission, please spell your last name so that our court reporter gets an accurate transcript.
Well, once again, hope everyone had a good holidays, and welcome back, Commissioner Mathis. And I've been here several times, as you well know. This is very important to our area, and I would like to address what is happening with LD7. As you know, Greenlee County is put in LD7, and we feel that if we continue to be in LD7, we will have no voice. We feel like, we have counties around us that have the same interest. We have Freeport-McMoran in our county, the second largest open pit mine in the world, produces 8% of the world copper. We are a contributing county, but we are considered a frontier county. There's only less than 8,500 people in Greenlee County, and but we are very active. And we feel like what you're doing with LD7, it just doesn't work for us. We feel like we could go, west with Graham County, who we share a lot of the same services. We've learned to stretch our buck the best way we can, and a lot of times it means counties getting together and sharing services to better serve our constituents. And we feel here in the proposed maps, you've split us. They're a mining, we're a farming, we have the same water issues. We just feel this is unacceptable to us. you know what, you can move 8,500 people anywhere on the map, and we're just a little speck, and we would really, really like being moved into another district. You know, as many of you, I've been here many times, so you know this is important. And I'm sure you guys feel like the ducks at a shooting gallery. I mean, everybody's got their guns pointed at you, and you know, you volunteered for this, and my sympathy goes with you. But anyway, but I also feel like the starfish on the seashore. You know, the little boy's throwing the starfish back into the sea, and someone says, well, hey, you can't make a difference. Well, the little boy picks up a starfish and throws it back into the sea and says, to that starfish, I made a difference. And that's the way we feel in Greeley County, is you know, it makes a difference to us. We're that starfish, and we're wanting to be thrown back into the sea because we feel like the proposed legislative District 7 is leaving us out on the seashore. Anyway, thank you so much. I know it's just what you want to hear is me come and once again beg you to change, but please, let us be that starfish you throw back into the sea, because it does matter to us. And, you know, I've traveled a lot of distance come and to be before this commission several times, and I hope that my voice doesn't fall on deaf ears, because it is important to me and my constituents. And once again, thank you for what you do. I feel for you guys, you know. I mean, time and time again, and thank you for your service. But please consider what we'd like to do in Greeley County. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Vince Leach, representing Self from Saddlebrook. Oh, okay. Sure. Our next speaker is Doris Klatenoff, representing Self from Saddlebrook.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Doris, D-O-R-I-S, Klatenoff, C-L-A-T-A-N-O-F-F. And I am here today to ask that you return the proposed LD8 legislative draft map that you had before the current one. We were pleased with the, I think it was the October map that you had for the proposed LD8. That was compact, it was concise, it placed us in an area where we felt that we did have a commonality and a community of interest. Now the new proposed map loses the compactness. It is actually a couple of communities of interest placed together. Because if you look at the community of Maricopa, they identify with Phoenix. We're from Saddlebrook. We identify more with Tucson and the southern part of Pinal County, although we can also very easily identify with Globe and other parts of Pinal County. And I couldn't help but to wonder this morning as I was listening to you how it reflected the past when I listened to the decisions that you are making. And this particularly ties in with the minorities. And you might think, you know, what does that Anglo woman know about stereotyping? Well, in 1951, my contract for teaching stipulated that if I were to be married, my contract would be terminated immediately. In 1988, I was a professor at a college in Texas. I applied for a position of the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. I was told, Doris, the guys like you, but they're not ready for a woman, Dean. The state of Texas had legislation that stipulated that you could not discriminate against minorities, but you could discriminate against women. as the chair of the Women's Commission for the Texas Faculty Association, I made sure that that changed. Now, that was over 20 years ago. So today I almost feel that I am being reversely discriminated against because I am being placed in a community where Saddlebrook is supposed to be competing with Maricopa, where we are not going to have competition anymore. And this bothers me. That's one of the reasons, but mainly because of the compactness and because of the fairness. I think fairness to both Republicans and Democrats. I would like to see that you return to the October proposed legislative district map. Thank you for that map, and keep it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Richard Brinkley, representing Self from Pinal County. Okay, we'll put you in that pile. Richard Miranda, State Representative, representing Arizona Minority Coalition.
Good morning, everyone. Richard Miranda, last name spelled M-I-R-A-N-D-A, and I'm here on behalf of the Arizona Minority Coalition, and it's my understanding, I tried to stay here the other day, but it took too long, so I had to leave. But I got a couple of phone calls and emails that there was a proposal to put the town of Guadalupe, and I'm not sure if that's still going on because I didn't see it up there, to put it in the next district, which would be Tempe. And in speaking with the town of Guadalupe this morning, they're getting a letter written again expressing their concerns if that was to happen, and to keep that in the district that is associated with South Phoenix. And then speaking on the Voting Rights Act, and I do want to tell you also, it's a very hard job that you do, and I think you've put a lot of time and effort into it, and you know, naturally not everyone's going to be happy with it, or quite a few people, but there are requirements that you have to do, and so that would be you know, making sure that the Voting Rights Act is followed. And so I feel if that's still an idea that's floating out there, my thoughts to you would be that it's going to be hard enough, I think, to get the maps as they're written right now to get past DOJ. I mean, it's not going to be a rubber stamp here. They're still going to have questions, and they're still going to try and see whether or not everything, you know, Voting Rights Act is protected and people have the ability to select a candidate of their choice. If you were to put, if the idea is still being floated out there that you put the town of Guadalupe in with the demographics of the Tempe area, you're even in making it less likely. I mean, it's you know, next to, you know, I'm not sure if it's going to be successful at all. It just you're putting in some demographics that are entirely different with the rest of Tempe, and so you know, if you know, the maps that's drawn right now still are going to have some very legitimate questions concerning the Voting Rights Act. And again, if that were to happen, the mountain would even get steeper if you did put the town of Guadalupe in with the rest of Tempe. So I was expecting, I just got on the phone with them this morning, I was expecting somebody from the city council here, and they still very well may be coming. I know they had a letter that they had already drafted, and maybe they're just trying to get all the city council to sign off on it before they get here. So those were my comments, and I'm not sure what the ideas are out there still.
Any questions?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
I know this is public comment, but I appreciate the opportunity to ask Representative Miranda a question. You say that the demographics are just completely different, and it would be inappropriate to put the town of Guadalupe with Tempe. Can you expand upon that, or would you defer to the city council? help me understand why that is.
Well, I mean, we've had the town of Guadalupe here, and you know, I'm sure the map people have given you the demographics, but I'll do it again. It's a entirely 99% minority population there, mostly Yaqui and Latino descent. And you know, it doesn't take far, just a couple of blocks for you to go from that part of town and then go into the next neighborhood that it's entirely different. And so I think DOJ would be very concerned if that were to happen, that it would be disenfranchising a population of almost 6,000 people. And we're not talking census blocks of, you know, non-descriptive type of, and we're talking about DOJ, so that's why we're bringing it up. You're talking about 6,000 people that DOJ is going to be extremely concerned about. And if you were to relocate that entire 6,000 people, this you know, this community, and you still have to get the Department of Justice to approve these maps, you're making, again, the mountain a lot bigger. So.
Entirely different from the surrounding areas at Tempe, or is it also entirely different than the associated areas in South Phoenix, or are there more similarities there?
I think there's again, I think we presented the argument in both at South Mountain Community College, in Glendale, and I spoke a little bit in Maryville. But again, that community is very much similar to if you go into South Phoenix. It's, you know, you have families that grew up in Guadalupe, and now their families have moved into South Phoenix. And there, it isn't just there's families that have been there for generations, way before you had Arizona Mills, way before you had all this development around there, and have always felt their own community. So, you know, to take that community and put that with the rest of that area that's east of it and southeast of it and north of it, you know, you're asking DOJ to approve that, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Other questions or comments?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Carol Klopatic from Fort McDowell, Yavapai Nation. If you'd like to, it's up to you. We can do it later too. Okay. Our next speaker is Nolan Larson from Navajo, White Mountain area.
I'm Nolan Larson, L-A-R-S-O-N. I've been a lifelong resident of the White Mountains. I'm a business owner up there. A little better. I own a trash company, so I'm a little bit of a fish out of water right now. Lots more comfortable behind a business picking up trash than addressing you today. So I've got a few notes to help me stay focused here. I employ 25 people, and they reside in the towns of Snowflake Taylor, Heber Overguard, Sholo, Pine Top, and Lakeside. I'm also a member of the Real Arizona Development Committee, and we meet trying to bring economic development to our cities and counties in that area. I regularly attend meetings with elected officials and other businesses and civic leaders in my area and work on economic development issues and conduct my business. I'm here because I recognize that there's a growing concern that our communities are not being placed in a position to succeed in the legislative process. My primary concern is a situation taking place within the communities of Sholo and its neighboring communities of Pine Top and Lakeside. During the last 10 years, our communities and their interests have been addressed, and our citizens have had representation that fits us well. As I look at the legislative draft map, I see that you've put Shoalo and Pinetop Lakeside in 2 separate districts. This definitely is a problem with the communities of interest, compactness, and contiguous factors. I also have seen several proposals which place Pinetop, Lakeside, and Shoalo in the new LD7, which is dominated by the Native American communities. I don't see much reason for this, and these are the 2 reasons. The Commission has been looking at minority voting rights for the Native Americans, and LD7 is what you have developed to satisfy that segment of the population of northern Arizona. Based on that data associated with your maps, there are more than enough voters to elect a candidate of their choosing. However, if you follow through with what you're planning to do, Pinetop and Shoalo, the voters of these areas would be swallowed up and effectively silenced. I live in a community that has the right to be counted at the ballot box. We should not be an afterthought in the minds of those who run our elected offices. Based on what I see, elected representatives from LD7 would have absolutely no accountability to our communities because they will not need our votes to win an election. It is clear that Pinetop, Lakeside, and Shoalo are better served by being in the same legislative district as Flagstaff. This course of action would not be my first choice, but it most definitely keeps the votes of my community relevant. Therefore, I ask for 2 things. In every circumstance, you keep Shoalo in LD6. And 2, make every effort to add Pinetop Lakeside into LD6 to preserve the communities of interest, compact geography, and contiguous nature of our 2 communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is David Tenney, Navajo County Supervisor.
Good morning. My name is David Tenney, T-E-N-N-E-Y. I'm a lifelong resident of the White Mountains. I currently serve as supervisor on the Navajo County Board of Supervisors representing District 4, which includes Shoalo, Heber, Overgard, and Taylor, and a few other unincorporated communities in between all those. I've been serving there for the last 7 years, and I also currently serve on the Executive Board of the County Supervisors Association. This is, I believe, the 3rd time that I've come to, well, maybe it's the first time I've come to testify because the first 2 you came up there into the Pinetop area, and a good choice to come down here. It's a bit cold up there this time of year, so thank you for allowing me. It was about 6 below the other day when I got up, and a little nicer this morning when I left the hotel, so thank you for allowing us to travel down today. I have testified before this body, and I'm here again in my capacity as leader of these communities to try to help explain some of the things that we feel like we need from this process. I've spoken previously about how much we have appreciated and enjoyed the last 10 years, what we call our ECO district, or the Eastern Counties Organization. The counties of Navajo, Apache, Greenlee, Graham, and Gila have all been in the same district the last 10 years, and it has served us well. I feel like there is no doubt that there was wisdom exercised on the part of your predecessors when they formed that district 10 years ago, because it did give a very strong rural voice in the legislative process. One example that I can give you is if not for that district, the state certainly wouldn't have ever come to know the Speaker of the House named Jake Flake, the late Jake Flake. I know many of you here know who he was and what an impact he had on the legislative process and on the overall well-being of the state of Arizona. And he was elected by that district. And with some of the proposed changes, that certainly would not have been something that he would have been able to do. Anyway, I have advocated for keeping the district similar to what we have had the last 10 years. I recognize that that's not going to be possible. So the next step we took was the second time I testified to advocate for not splitting Shoalo and the Pinetop Lakeside communities. However, I must say that in doing so, it was not my imagination that you put us back together in LD7, but you put us back together in LD6. sometimes it feels like, as Supervisor Lunt expressed earlier, that sometimes we feel like our population is being used for nothing more than to fill those population numbers and not realize that we are a block of citizens and voters who have had a relevant voice in the legislative process and who deserve one going forward. I do believe that if the proposal to move both Show Low and Pine Top into the new LD7, then those voters would be overwhelmed and would be effectively silenced due to the fact that elected representation from that area would have no accountability to the voters of that area because they would not be the ones crucial to them being elected. I believe it is clear that the residents of Pine Top, Lakeside, and Show Low are better served if they are allowed to be in one district. But if that is not possible, by all means it is better to leave Show Low in District 6 and then to move Show Low into District 7. So those are my two asks today. If at all possible, move Pine Top into 6 with Show Low because of so much that we share between those two communities. But if that's not possible, then first and foremost to leave the community of Show Low in the new proposed LD6. That is my request today, and I also thank you for what you do. It has been a crazy ride for you folks. I know it has, and my wife will probably shoot me if this makes the newspaper, because I always say stuff that she wishes I hadn't. But I will liken what you do to someone who wets themselves in a dark suit. You get a warm feeling, but nobody really notices, and that's kind of the job you guys have got, and I recognize that. And there's no reporters here, I hope, but
There are.
Okay. Can you have that stricken from the record, Madam Chair? Anyway, I hope you understand what I'm saying. I do recognize the tenuous situation you find yourself in, and you are getting harped at and yelled at from every side, and we recognize that. And so first and foremost, I thank you for your service. As a public servant myself, I recognize that that's not always easy, especially when you get paid the big bucks that you guys are getting paid for this for this gig that you have. So thank you for what you do. And if at all possible, if you can see to it to leave, if you can find a way to get Pine Top back in with Show Low in 6, that would be great. If not, by all means, we request that Show Low be allowed to remain as was previously on the maps in LD6, along with the Flagstaff area. Thank you very much, and I would stand for any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Any questions?
All right.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
very
your
much.
service, too.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Judith Dworkin, representing Navajo Nation.
Good morning. Judith Dworkin. Last name is spelled D-W-O-R-K-I-N. And I'm actually here. I represent the Navajo Nation, but I'm here to read a letter from the Hopi Tribe Chairman. Arizona, December 8th, 2011, Arizona Redistricting Commission, Phoenix, Arizona. Dear Redistricting Commission, the Hopi Tribe has been made aware that the commissioners are proposing a revision to the draft Legislative District 7 and moving into Winslow into Legislative District 6. The Hopi Tribal Council objects to this revision and does not support this change. The Hopi Tribe has an interest in this area. We own property and ranches within and around the Winslow area. Winslow's population includes a substantial Native American population who would be able to elect a candidate of their choice only if they are located in District 7. Hopi continues to uphold the position that all Hopi lands remain in the same district. We understand that the Apache tribes may also be interested in including Show Low in LD7. Perhaps there is a way to include both Winslow and Show Low. We believe the Navajo Nation may have already introduced a map that does that. We ask that you consider our position and urge you to retain Winslow in LD7. And it's signed sincerely by the chairman of the Hopi Tribe. And I have the original for the record and copies for all of the commissioners.
Great.
That's the full amount of my comments this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Ms. Gomez will take that from you. Thank you very much. Sure. Our next speaker is Brad Lundahl, representing the city of Scottsdale.
Good morning, Madam Chair. I'm also here for Legislative District 2324. I didn't know if you wanted to take testimony now or wait. I'm happy either way.
It's up to you.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and get it out of the way then.
Okay.
I see the mic guy coming toward me. I'm Brad Lundahl, L-U-N-D-A-H-L. I'm the Government Relations Director for the City of Scottsdale. And I'm here today. Our City Council on Tuesday night adopted a resolution pertaining to the legislative district maps. And they requested that I bring that resolution to you today and deliver it to you. Essentially, the resolution requests that the legislative district map be redrawn to place Scottsdale in one legislative district. Currently, we're split up into two, with the split occurring on the southern portion of Scottsdale. The emphasis from the City Council was to move that southern portion of the city back into the main part, or back into the main map. They felt that splitting that southern portion of Scottsdale definitely got away from the community of interest parameter. So with that, I've got copies of the resolution that I've brought for you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, we'll take those copies. Our next speaker is Michael Mandel, attorney for Coconino County.
My name is Michael Mandel, M-A-N-D-E-L-L. I'm an attorney representing Coconino County. I just wanted to thank the Commission for including or talking to include the Schultz flood area into LD6 in those changes, and just wanted to again reiterate our support for that change.
Thank you. Any questions on that one? Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Pete Bankson, representing SELF from Pima.
It's Peter Bankson, B-E-N-G-T-S-O-N. I feel I've gamed the system or lucked out to show up and get called to speak right away. I wanted to commend the Commission for CD2. That's my new congressional district. I'm very happy with it. It's compact, contiguous. It seems to be very competitive. In addition, it maintains the communities of interest of the military bases in the western foothills. The other thing I wanted to mention, the first time I attended these meetings was a June 30th meeting in Tucson, and it was pretty scary to me. And a lot of Tea Party folks beating on the Commission, and especially strategic telemetry. I've been trying to only come to one meeting a week, so I've been watching on the TV. And I'm really impressed with how carefully strategic telemetry is to always get direction from the Commission on any proposed changes that are made. I think they're to be commended for that. They're making it very obvious that they're not inserting themselves in any way into the mapping process. All the direction is coming from the commissioners. And that's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Gino Turabiates from the town of Guadalupe.
Very well pronounced there,
Thanks.
Chairwoman. My name is Gino, G-I-N-O, last name Turrubiartes, T-U-R-R-U-B-I-A-R-T-E-S. I'm the Community Development Director for the town of Guadalupe. Dear IRC Commission, the Town Council of Guadalupe voted and requested that we stay in Legislative District 16 as presented by Senator Leah Landrum Taylor Representative Richard Miranda to the IRC in previous meetings. The town of Guadalupe finds commonality with its neighbors to the west, South Phoenix and Laveen. The Town Council of Guadalupe would also like to support the congressional maps as proposed by the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government. To that end, we would also like to note that the town of Guadalupe has successfully worked together with the city of Tolleson on economic development for both of our communities, and we share a lot of commonality within our well-established communities. I ask that the IRC include the town of Guadalupe with its neighboring communities to the west on both legislative and congressional districts. Gracias, and thank you for your hard work. We recognize the challenges that you continue to have in front of you. Is there something, would you like me to give that to Ms. Gomez?
Yes, please. And are there any questions on this? Okay.
All right, have a great day.
Thank you, you too. My last request to speak form so far is from Leonard Gorman, Executive Director, Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission.
Madam Chair and members of the Commission, good morning. Leonard Gorman, first name Leonard, last name Gorman, Gorman. I have a map that's being provided to you on Legislative District, draft map Legislative District 7, and it's entitled Navajo Nation Adjustments, December 9, 2011. First, I just want to point out that Navajo Nation has been an intimate participant in your discussions since you started your meetings earlier this year. And we've made submissions, comments, and recommendations about Navajo Nation's concerns and points that it wishes to be incorporated into the legislative district in which the Navajo Nation is located. We've also talked to you extensively about the compliance with the Voting Rights Act, sections 2 and 5, the state of Arizona being a covered jurisdiction. We've presented to you ample amount of information based on our opinion that Navajo people that live on the Navajo Nation are complicated when election day comes about, especially when the Navajo Nation election happens on the same day as the state election. And we recognize that there are times in which Navajo voters are disenfranchised simply because they have to travel distances from polling place to polling place to complete their participation in elections. Since your second round of meetings started back in the latter part of November 2011, Navajo Nation also reassessed based on some of the comments and recommendations that the Navajo Nation heard, and submitted a new map on Monday, December 5, in which our effort is as a primary concern to ensure that the voters of the Navajo Nation are appropriately protected, their voting rights are appropriately protected, and that competitiveness is either secondary or third or fourth down the list of concerns of the Navajo Nation. The second part of the concern is the community of interest in relationship to the geographic areas. Navajo Nation has clearly illustrated throughout the course of several months that it has land holdings off the Navajo Nation, and these are the efforts on a long-term plan basis by the Navajo Nation to ensure that sacred places, sacred lands are appropriately cared for into the future. And those are some of the reasons why Navajo Nation is making strategic effort to ensure that lands that the people have held traditionally are appropriately considered. Likewise, the Hopi Nation has accompanied the Navajo Nation in expressing strong concerns about lands that they have purchased off their nation in areas surrounding the city of Winslow. We have joined the Hopi Nation to express those concerns. Additionally, the Navajo Nation has met oftentimes with the Apache nations. Specifically, the San Carlos Apache has been very supportive of the Navajo Nation's maps that have been submitted. So today, concerns are being expressed about communities in Greenlee and Sholo, and also concerns about the Schultz fire flood area. So as we go through this map that I'm sharing with you, the Navajo Nation, again, is listening to the comments and recommendations that are being offered by not only folks that are now in the legislative district proposal, District 7, but also in the surrounding areas. And Navajo Nation has made many compromises. And again, today we submit to you a map that we believe illustrates another compromise. At the same time, making every effort to protect the Native American voting age population in the proposed legislative District 7. We all know that that particular district is a protected district. It has to go through the scrutiny of the U.S. Department of Justice. So all of the iterations and the comments that the Navajo Nation has made certainly would be at the desktop of whomever that person is going to be to review your recommendation. And we appreciate all of the opportunities and comments and also the renditions that were provided by and continue to be provided by your mapping firm. I think the Navajo Nation, the Navajo people are in the best position to determine what is in their best interest. And the Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission has been given that responsibility while consulting with elected officials back on the Navajo Nation to present these stated positions. And again, this is the adjusted position as of December 9, 2011. So as we go through the map, from the northwest corner, we do take out the area in Mojave County, as was presented to you earlier when the Winslow Sholo switch was presented to you. We continue to incorporate the Havasupai, Wallapai nations, along with the Navajo Nation's Big Boquillas Ranch in Coconino County. The area that we are recommending the adjustment is in the southern area, the southern rim of Grand Canyon. There is a voting district that the Navajo Nation is willing to release into now the draft proposed District 6. There's a population of over 2,000 people in that area. We're willing to work with that. But as you go down south from there, we have made the adjustments from your draft District 7 map to also tweak on the western side of Espel Ranch and also give that population to District 6. In the northeast area of Flagstaff, we had proposed originally, which is in the draft map, to also give Doney Park to Legislative 6. We also made the recommendation based on the requests from Coconino County to include the Timberline and Fernwood area based on the map that was shared with the Navajo Nation by Coconino County. So the iteration that was projected on the screen earlier that represents the narrow Schultz fire area, that does not represent the Navajo Nation's proposal in that area. It grabs land areas that are now permitted to the Navajo Nation under the Espel Ranch. Navajo Nation opposes that rendition. Okay. Now, as we go towards the Winslow area along the interstate, the Hopi ranches are included in this proposal as it is in the draft map. As the Hopi Nation submitted its letter, the Navajo Nation continues to support the effort to ensure that those lands that have been purchased by the Hopi Nation and also by the Navajo Nation be incorporated into Legislative District 7. So we continue to state that position. In the area where Holbrook and Joseph City are located, we have worked with the Navajo County in their efforts to redraw their districts. The Navajo County, as the chairman has presented to you earlier, the Navajo Nation has diligently worked with the county and their redistricting committee to come up with a plan that both the county and the Navajo Nation find it satisfactory. In our work with them, the District 1 in the Navajo County, the southern boundary runs north of the city of Holbrook. The recommendation from the Navajo Nation is just to simply follow that southern boundary of District 1 in Navajo County for Legislative District 7. So that is the adjustment that we have also made from the draft District 7 to the December 5th proposal. We still run the district boundary 7 along the Apache Navajo County line to the highway that runs from Show Low to Apache County. We use that highway and go westward and go around the city limits of Show Low. And then this is where we also make the adjustment today. Our recommendation is to pick up the city limits of Linden to be incorporated into Legislative District 7. The remainder of the district boundary around the White Mountain and the San Carlos Apache Nations and their lands remain the same. Our proposal also is from the December 5th to remove the entirety of Greenlee County from Legislative District 7. We certainly would like to have the opportunity to resuscitate some of these areas that have been commented on earlier today. However, as we have indicated time and time again, that we are very concerned about the Native American voting age population. That is the factor that for Navajo Nation that directs how the mapping should be done. And secondarily, third, fourth, and fifth areas of concerns, the compactness, the contiguity, community of interests, competitiveness, those are also factors that the Navajo Nation hopes to take into consideration. So with that presentation, I think the Navajo Nation has made ample efforts to work not only with this commission, but also comments and recommendations that have been offered to this honorable commission by members of the public, by members, dignitaries from various agencies, the counties, the cities, to seek a plan that they feel that they would feel comfortable with. We've made that effort to this day. So with that, I stand for questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Gorman?
Do you have a block equivalency file of this map that we could give to Mr. Desmond?
Madam Chair, Commissioner McNulty, yes, we can forward either the equivalency or the shape files to your mapping consultant.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Were you finished, Ms. McNulty? Do you want to?
I was going to ask if you'd done the same kind of analysis on this map that that we've done, but if you can give the file to Mr. Desmond, we can do that. Thank you.
Mr. Herrera?
Mr. Gorman, this map that we just did, it went over, is different from the one we went over on the 5th of December, correct? Slight modifications?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Commissioner Herrera, as I pointed out, there's only two differences from the December 5th map that we submitted to the one that's dated December 9th. The areas that are different is in the south rim of the Grand Canyon. There is a voting district of a population a little over 2,000 that would be extracted out of District 7. In its place, the community, the city limits of Linden would be added to District 7, that is west of Sholo.
The reason I ask is that I think it was yesterday's meeting, one of the commissioners had proposed to increase the voting age population for the Navajo Nation or the District 7 is to start going into Flagstaff and taking population there. And I don't see you doing that in this map. So is it safe to assume that you're not in favor of that?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Commissioner Herrera, we will make the comment when that issue comes to the table before the Commission.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Gorman?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was my last request to speak form. Oh, maybe not. Oh, sure. Okay. I think Mr. Leach would like to speak. He spoke a little bit earlier from Greenlee. Oh, this is Mr. Leach. I'm sorry. Different person. Vince Leach.
Leach, L-E-A-C-H, friends. Is there going to be a discussion presentation on, it's confusing maybe to, obviously, with all you dealing with the maps and also the members of the public. I live currently in LD 26. Is a discussion that's forthcoming on the current LD 26 or the LD 26 that is now proposed by the Commission? Because I want to speak to where I currently live. So that's where I want to address my remarks. So that's the reason. Please, if I may ask, straighten me out.
Sure, no problem. Right now we've been focusing as a commission on making adjustments to voting rights districts so that we can all agree upon different things to propose for further analysis from our racially polarized voting expert who's doing some work on these maps from a voting rights perspective. We are, though, taking comment on just other districts as well. We won't be necessarily presenting anything on the LD 26 area. We can certainly pull it up, though.
So my specific question, if I may, Madam Chair, is does LD 26 refer to the current LD 26 or to the LD 26? I see Mr. Herrera shaking his head. No, it would be to your new
Correct.
LD 26. Then with the chair's permission, I would like to say a few comments now.
Sure.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, and those that I have had the privilege of meeting in prior meetings, it's good to be here in Phoenix. Let me go back, if I may, a few meetings ago where I addressed the Commission in Casa Grande, and we talked about communities of interest. Living in Saddlebrook at that time, there was some discussion about moving us completely north into Casa Grande and possibly Phoenix. And I'm pleased that the Commission so far has seen fit to keep us, at least Saddlebrook and Oro Valley, together as a community of interest. My concern is thus that what I see from LD 8, from the map that was approved in October, to what I'm seeing as proposed now for the Saddlebrook Oro Valley area, is a complete breakage of that group. While Oro Valley and Saddlebrook still remain together, you now have put us potentially in with Maricopa and dragging us further north, basically into the to the Phoenix metro market. We have argued, those of us in Saddlebrook have argued that vehemently at the county level, as the county level has done the same thing in taking our district and making basically a dogleg out of it and making it very much non-community of interest. In South Tucson, I spoke with the commission about the competitiveness of where we stand. I haven't seen any numbers on the new proposed change on LD8, but it is foreign to me how you can take the Saddlebrook Oro Valley area, which is primarily of the R nature, and combine it with Maricopa, which is of the R nature, of the Republican nature, and make that so Republican that it would seem to me that those that carry a D behind their name certainly would be disenfranchised in that area. And my word to the commission would be, I have heard competitiveness, competitiveness, competitiveness since this has started, and I'm having problems understanding how you can pack an area such as the proposal would indicate and make it highly Republican, and in fact putting two sitting senators of the R nature together and call that being more competitive. I'm sure that there will be some definition from that as we go forward. Moving on to a Phoenix meeting where we had all kinds of problems getting everybody hooked up on the computer and the telephones and one thing and the other, and Mr. Freeman kind of chaired that along with Mr. Herrera and trying to get everybody connected. I talked at the 3-minute length we were given in that meeting about what seemingly the commission is trying to do with working with mathematical numbers. We had a very long, very interesting presentation by ST. You were remote that day, and you went through the types of maps, the circular maps, and how the perfect district would be set up. My point at that meeting and my argument at that meeting is it seems as though the commission and certainly the mathematicians on the commission seem to want to reduce everything down to a mathematical equation. We have to remember that the situation coming out of Washington, the situation coming out of Phoenix, and certainly the situation in my home county where we're looking at being $60 million in debt, in debt beyond the rainy day fund, it would seem to me that you can play with mathematical equations all day long, but the fact of the matter is if you don't have good governance, the fact is those people will be thrown out. I don't care if they're D's, if they're R's, or if they're I's, or if they're PNDs. And so, you know, we can balance this on mathematical and we can take it to DOJ all we want, but the fact is, I would think that the commission wants to be very, very careful, you know, in looking forward and saying, this is how we're going to do it 10 years out. You've heard that from me before, but you're taking information, for example, a miner of the Department of Mine Inspections in 2010 and trying to equate that out to something in 2020 is beyond, certainly beyond the scope of what this mine can handle. My message, my request today is that you leave LD8 as it was proposed in October and not make it the bottom of Saddlebrook and Oro Valley, the bottom part of a windshield wiper where we were basically included in over to San Manuel, up through Winkleman, Hayden, and the Copper Corridor, and take us away from Maricopa. I do thank you for the extended time today, and with that, if anyone has any questions, I'd be pleased to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did the other two folks that opted to decline want to speak now, by chance? Richard Brinkley and Carol Klopatic? Okay, Richard Brinkley, representing Self from Pinal County.
My name is Richard Brinkley. I'm from southern Pinal County. I am a bit perplexed. The commission has called for public comment on proposed changes to LD8 and 11. In fact, I saw a map on that this morning. Yet, the commission has failed to provide the public with the data supporting the changes, and now I'm asked to respond before the changes are even made public in this hearing. As a result, the proposed map changes for LD 8 and 11 failed to pass the proverbial sniff test for the following reasons. Casa Grande is split. Where is the community of interest criteria? Where are the backup data supporting the split? The absence of voter spread numbers speaks volumes regarding the lack of transparency of this process. Where are the backup data? The criteria of compactness has been ignored. Where is the rationale for abandoning compactness criteria? Hyperpacking of either party within a legislative district is not competitive. On the contrary, it's anti-competitive. I would hate to see this commission endorse anti-competitive criteria. As a result, I respectfully urge the commission to keep the proposed maps of October 2011 for LD 8 and 11. Thank you, and I'll answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. And Carol Klopatek, do you? Okay. We'll have another public comment at the end of the day, which is normally when we do public comment, but today we just thought it would be helpful given all this talk about LD7 and any proposed changes. So thank you for everyone who did provide input on that, and we really appreciate your help. The time is 11:09. Do we want to take a quick break at all? Okay, just a 5-minute break, and we'll be back shortly. The time is 11:09. Okay, we'll enter back into public session. The time is 11:36 a.m. And the public comment we received was very helpful. I think Mr. Desmond's working on pulling up the shapefile that Mr. Gorman submitted with the new Navajo Nation adjustments for LD7. How far would you say we are from that, Mr. Desmond?
Well, I have the file and can show you the outline. The issue right now is that I haven't been able to load it as a plan yet to totally analyze the effects it'll have on the other districts. So I would say maybe 5 more minutes until
Okay.
I have it, and then I can hand it off to Ken and he can be
Okay, thanks.
away on that. Well,
Do commissioners have any thoughts on what we just heard during public comment?
Just a question. Have we been posting on the website the proposed changes, including the proposed changes by the Navajo Nation? Okay. Oh, you've posted today's December 9th version for Mr. Gorman? Okay.
And that goes for all the other changes that they've been working on. They're updated? Good. Okay. Ms. McNulty? I couldn't tell.
So I think that means that the LD L11 change is posted.
yes.
Okay.
And,
Thank you.
I can show you how those are, but there's 4 types of files for each one of the changes. There's a block equivalency report, so if you have mapping software and would like to load it on your own computer, you can do that. There is a JPEG, that is kind of a picture of the map with the title, just so you can kind of roughly see where the change is. There's the Google Maps KMZ file, so that if you want to load the change and compare it to the draft district, you can look at it in Google Maps. And then there is the PDF, which is the same exact change report that you guys receive when we present a new change. And those are available for each one of the ones that have been discussed, all on the website.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Not necessarily a question about the public comment, but I do have a question about some of the proposed changes that we were talking about yesterday with the majority-minority districts and ways to improve them. When are we going to be able to hear a presentation on how those will look?
I believe that the ones that we talked about yesterday, we agreed would be proposed for further analysis. And so are you asking when we'll get that further analysis? My understanding is it could take at least 2 weeks, so I don't know, I'll ask.
And I should also mention the changes that were submitted for analysis yesterday led us to having a new working map, so a new baseline that we're working off of. If you go to the maps page on the website, there is a section on the top that says working maps. And so what that is it's the draft maps with those changes that we submitted for analysis. And those are available as a block equivalency file, as a shape file, as a maptitude map file. And there's also a short Word document that lays out what the starting point was and what changes were made to get to that working map. But Ken will talk more about Dr. King's analysis.
I was just going to confirm what Chairwoman Mathis said, that it will be a week or two probably. I expect Monday to have a better sense of the timeline on the changes that we've submitted today and yesterday.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrero?
And this is for Mr. Strasma. What can we do? Is there anything we can do in our part to make that a 1 week as opposed to 2 week? So is there anything we can do in our end to limit that to 1 week?
I don't believe there's anything that you as commissioners can do to speed Dr. King's process. The one thing that will help is, to the extent that we can get any changes that we're contemplating in voting rights districts nailed down today, that gets us 2 more days over the weekend for processing that we wouldn't have if they had to be discussed on Monday. So I would encourage you to do whatever possible to come to a tentative, at least, conclusion on the voting rights districts today.
Madam Chair, Mr. Strauss, I'm looking at what we did yesterday. It looks like we need to talk about LD 26, LD 7, which we just spoke about, and LD 2 today. Is that right?
Yes, we do have a minor change for LD 26 prepared. And I believe we were close on that, and the commission would probably be. And also there was some more discussion on the LD 2 change that we'd like to discuss.
Okay, so we'll get to both of those things.
So I do have the Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission map loaded now. I'm running it on my computer. I think Ken is going to do so also. So we'll keep track of where that is as soon as the change report is ready. Once the change report is ready, I won't be able to print copies for you, obviously, but we can discuss some of those changes right now. Before we do that, though, I can show you, just to emphasize some of the changes that the Navajo Nation submitted. One thing I'd like to note is that it's a slightly different area of the Schultz Fire / flood area. So as not to go into the Espill Ranch at all. Also, and I don't know if this was mentioned, this proposed District 7 does have Greenlee County removed. So Greenlee County would then go with District 1. When we're considering the changes to Cochise and Green Valley, we're going to need to pay attention to that. I believe that change left District 1 slightly higher, so that District 1 then became overpopulated by about 3,300 people. Adding Greenlee County into that also would add another 9,000 or 10,000 people, so that would be a pretty high population deviation. Just one thing to keep in mind is that these changes, where they do overlap, sometimes can have unintended consequences with higher population deviations than we necessarily thought, looking at the changes independent of one another.
Can you just point to the areas of change on the map, Mr. Desmond?
Sure.
Just for visual purposes.
Okay, so starting changes to the there's one change I did not get, so I'm going to have to add that in also. The change would be to remove this area of Mojave County. Additionally, there are some changes here in Coconino County. I don't believe they're in any census place, maybe a little portion here in parks. A little section of parks there is added into District 6. So District 6 grows a little bit there. Also District 6 grows here at the Schultz flood area. Additionally, District 6 takes in Sun Valley, or District 7, excuse me, takes in Sun Valley. And also takes in Sholo and Linden, Arizona. And then the border changes here slightly, also taking in some of this unincorporated area.
And now Greenlee County is completely out of 7? Or not?
Yes, also Greenlee County. If you'll hold on just one second. So Greenlee County goes from District 7 into District 1. If you would just give me 1 second, I'm going to export this plan so that Ken can run the numbers on it.
Chairman Lunt left too early. He'll be happy with that change if that's what the commission decides.
Are there other questions I can answer without using my computer?
I think we need the change report in order to make any real progress on this. There is a business center here too where we could, if we could load it into the computer, we could print out the change report.
Mr. Bladine, maybe, or Ms. Gomez can help us with that in terms of getting the change report printed on this so that we can look at it today.
It'll be about 5-10 minutes before the change report is ready, and then we can have Ms. Gomez, Mr. Bellini, go find a place to print it, I guess, quickly. In the meantime, is there other questions I can answer about this change, or should we just kind of table this for a moment while we we'll wait for that to finish running?
I'll ask Mr. Adelson and Mr. Strasma, is there any comments you wanted to make now, or would you rather wait until we have the map?
Nothing from me until we're able to see the data in the change report.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, certainly when the report is ready, we can comment on that and have the other comments that are associated with it all together.
Okay. Anything from commissioners?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
that change, if adopted wholesale, would, I believe, include Show Low and Linden in LD7, whereas I believe before it was only Pine Top Lakeside. Can we also look at a map if Show Low, Pine Top Lakeside being placed in proposed LD6?
Yes, I can look at that. Let me just quickly tell you how many people are in that area, so we know. So in Show Low and Linden are roughly 16,700 people. So adding them into District 6 would work with the rest of these changes, because District 6 is underpopulated here. It's 9,912 people underpopulated. So we can also run a change report that would make District 6 slightly overpopulated, but within our comfortable margin. So as soon as this one is finished, I can prepare that also. But that's, again, both these things are going to take a little time, so I don't know if you like break so we can get these ready, or if you're comfortable us kind of just doing it in the background while you discuss other matters.
Are there other changes or suggestions that people have?
Would we want to hear the public comment that we haven't heard yet?
Sure.
Perhaps?
I think there's only one, Carol
Okay.
Klopatic. That would be great.
We'll be moving on to LD 26 pretty soon, so maybe that makes sense.
Great.
My name is Carol, C-A-R-O-L-E, Klopatic, K-L-O-P-A-T-E-K, representing Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation. Madam Commissioner, Commissioners, thank you for allowing me to appear again before you. Fort McDowell has previously provided testimony written. We've provided oral testimony. We've met with the commission. We've met one-on-one with individuals. We've met with the attorneys. We've met with the staff. And we want to thank you for allowing us to provide you information based on new information that we have to give you today. We have stated in the past that Fort McDowell, in terms of the congressional legislative district, we appreciated being in Congressional District 6 as opposed to being in Congressional District 1, which is a large rural district, because, quite frankly, the nation doesn't feel that they are a part of or have or a community of interest with Congressional District 1. We feel that being part of the Phoenix Metropolitan and Maricopa County area, that we share boundaries not only with Salt River, Pima, Maricopa, with other municipalities, with Fountain Hills, with Scottsdale. And we're working partners. We have jointly formed numerous IGAs. We have various mutual aid agreements, development agreements. Our children go to neighboring schools. We've formed strategic economic alliances, joint tourism bureaus, and joint tourism ventures. We've jointly resolved transportation issues and received funding for that. So basically resource allocations, and so we are basically part of a group in the East Valley. We're very strongly connected in a lot of different ways. So as a result of becoming such bonded neighbors, we like this, basically, Fort McDowell, Scottsdale, Fountain Hills district. We like this. So when we discussed our request and asked IRC to realign Fort McDowell in the legislative side to be in District 23 as opposed to District 24, we gave all of those reasons as we did for the congressional district. Now, when the nation proposed changes to the map, we were talking about a total population from Fort McDowell of 971 people, moving them from Legislative 24 to Legislative District 23, of which only 614 people are of voting age. Now, if you look at it from a standpoint of what this equates to, is that it's about 0.3% of the total population would move from Legislative District 24 to Legislative District 23. Now, rough analysis based on the draft map shows that LD24's deviation from the target district population would decrease from 0.3 to minus 2.5, while LD24 would go from 0.2 to minus 0.2. And that's without tweaking the map. The Hispanic voting age population would decrease by only 86 people, or 0.165%. Moreover, although we haven't calculated this, since the current alignment of Legislative 24 is currently overpopulated by 517 people, this would help to alleviate or even out the population in Legislative District 24. In our opinion, this move would not impact the ability to elect. Now, although this change, in our opinion, feel that we have negligible effects on both districts, requiring no further changes, or at maximum requiring a very minor tweak that can be easily accomplished. We had heard on December 5th, and then we had also heard on December 7th at the IRC business meetings that it may not be something that this commission is in support of the nation's request. Now, from what we understand is that there haven't been any tweaks to the map, the draft map, with the mapping consultant. And that's meaning moving any certain populations or tracts or data analysis or change reports that have been done in order to accommodate our request. Now, last month, as I said, we had met before, and there were comments that were made to us and saying, this change is so minor, we really can't see this is really going to have much of an effect. And so we were under the impression that this was going to be fine. Now, the only rationale we heard why we may be denied this, moving our population, may have the ability to enhance Legislative District 24 as a majority-minority district. Now, we understand this concern. However, what was also stated in the IRC meetings, business meetings, is that absolute population numbers are not the only governing criteria, standard, or legal threshold to construct districts that can commonly uphold the Voting Rights Act. Now, from our point of view, in not accommodating or finding a means to accommodate the nation, the current alignment places the burden of this district squarely on the shoulders of an entire sovereign nation. Now, if you indulge me a moment, I'd like to read something that the President would like me to go ahead and read into the record. And I want to read it exactly the way he had phrased it. Now, he said, "We would like to share with IRC Fort McDowell's Yavapai Nation's deep-seated appreciation, commitment, and knowledge of the Voting Rights Act and what voting means to the people of this nation. As you are aware, Native Americans were denied the legal right to vote for a very, very long time. In the 1940s, Mr. Frank Harrison, a gentleman and a veteran of Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation, was denied the right to vote after he came back from serving his country from World War II. Why? Because, quote unquote, he was Indian. In the meantime, he observed that more Yavapai elders were in need of assistance following the war. Despite having paid their fair share of taxes through their payroll deductions, they were repeatedly denied services from the federal or services from the state or federal benefits that were so desperately needed. Essentially, the Yavapai people were paying taxes but denied representation. In order to combat these injustices, on November 8, 1947, Mr. Harrison, joined by then Yavapai Chairman Mr. Harry Austin, walked all the way from Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation from the reservation to Maricopa County Recorder's Office to register to vote, where they were summarily denied any type of voter registration. The suit was filed, and eventually the Arizona Supreme Court unanimously allowed them their constitutional right to vote. This decision led the way for all Native Americans across the U.S. to enjoy the most basic and fundamental right of American citizens, the right to vote. Thus, we are well aware of what it means to protect the rights of everyone. The nation requests this move from LD 24 to LD 23 as we provided the information to support our findings and recommendation. We truly feel not only allowing for analysis or accommodating this very minor change will disenfranchise an entire sovereign nation. It feels as if you're basically slighting the voters in a sovereign nation. Basically how Fort McDowell feels. And they fought so hard for these rights to vote, and yet nobody's listening. Now, instead, we see efforts being put on minority coalitions or other individuals, and work is being performed, and requisite analysis, change reports, they're all being done. But nobody's looking at what Fort McDowell has been presenting. Now, from the President's, again, I want to quote him. He said, "I am a tribal elder, and I'm an elected official who has been serving for over 44 years at the pleasure of the citizens of a small but proud community of Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation. I can attest that I, along with my fellow council members, understand the needs, the desires of our people. Although the nation is deeply sad and frustrated by this, we sincerely trust you will provide a means to accomplish our request and perform the analysis you have performed and made accommodations for others. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you." That was the comments. And I just need to add is that when we were looking at our tribal council and we were looking at the number of years, that our current tribal council has over 200 years of elected experience. People come in their door every single day. They don't just have once a month meetings. They don't have just once a week. They are dealing with their individuals every day. So they know what their people want. And so that's basically what I had to say today. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. And I will go ahead, and there's the actual signed report has been sent over, the original copy to Chairwoman, and any additional information I can go ahead and provide. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions?
I do have one question, Madam Chair. Ms. Klopadak, you're here on behalf of the Fort McDowell Nation. I understand from that the Salt River tribe is satisfied to stay in District 24. Is that correct?
Yes, and we have had multiple meetings in terms of, where, in making sure, congressional district, legislative district, and we've met with the three urban tribes. We went with Gila River, and we are all comfortable, and we all agree in all of the principles in which we've put forth today.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who wanted to address us? Okay, we'll check in with Mr. Desmond and see how things are coming.
Ms. Gomez has the change report to the map that the Navajo Nation submitted today to print. Commissioner Freeman, I looked at keeping Sholo and Lakeside, or I'm sorry, excuse me, Linden in District 6. And while District 6 can take that population and only have a deviation of positive 6,500 people, that does affect District 7 to a very large amount that I just didn't see at first. So that District 7 would then be underpopulated by 26,501 people, a deviation of negative 12.44%. So for Sholo and Linden to stay in District 6 with this change, District 7 would need to make up population somewhere. I mean, one possible place to do it is, again, to pick up Greenlee. That would add, I can show you this on the screen. So with Sholo, Linden in District 6, District 7 is then underpopulated by 26,501 people. If District 7 picks up some population in Greenlee, that would add 8,437 people. District 7 would still be underpopulated by 18,064, a deviation of negative 8.48%. So it's likely that they would have to make up a little bit more population somewhere else.
And then, Mr. Desmond, if Sholo and Pine Top Lakeside remain split, what was the population deficit for LD7?
Well, right here, as it is right now, it is remained split. If you add Pine Top also into District 6, so that those areas stay together, but in the non-majority minority district, District 7 then is underpopulated by 36,000 people.
Okay, but
so if we're
not communicating. If Pine Top Lakeside stays in LD7, but Sholo stays in LD6.
That's this scenario right here, underpopulated by 26,000.
What's the percent?
12.44% underpopulated. When you add Greenlee back in, that drops to 8.48% underpopulated.
Okay, and that's also accepting all the other changes.
All the other changes,
proposed.
yeah.
Okay.
So, and then, obviously the current map doesn't have a deviation in District 6 or District 7 that high. I know Ms. Gomez is printing it, but I can show you some of this change report if that's helpful, or we can just wait for it to be printed.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so the districts that are affected with this map that was submitted by the Navajo Nation are 1, 5, 6, and 7. District 1 goes from a population deviation of negative 2.4% to a population deviation of positive 1.5%. It's not a voting rights district. We can look at what effects that would have on the splits and competitiveness in a second. But as far as the other categories, those probably aren't very applicable. District 5, again, this is taking in the Arizona Strip portion of Mojave County, goes from 4,500 people underpopulated, or 2.1%, to overpopulated by about 6,000 people, or 2.8%. Again, not a voting rights district. District 6 in this scenario loses 11,674 people. So District 6 goes from a population deviation of positive 0.8% to a population deviation of negative 5.5 or negative 4.7%. So it's underpopulated by 9,912 people. District 7, the voting rights district, goes from a population of a deviation of negative 1.3% to a population deviation of negative 4.7%. It is a voting rights district, so the population deviation is a little less troubling there if we could justify it. The Native American percentage goes from 63.7 up to 65.9. The voting age Native American percentage goes from 61.9 up to 63.1. The total minority voting age goes from 71.9 up to down to 71.3. So that the district did become less Hispanic, but it became more Native American. As far as the ability to elect indicators that we have here, it was fairly strong on all of those before, and it, although it lost a little bit, it remained very strong. But it did.
And go ahead.
Although the ability to elect races that are programmed in here are primarily focused on candidate of choice for Hispanic districts. In another race that we wanted to look at specifically for this district was Secretary of State 2010, where the Democratic candidate was very clearly the candidate of choice for the Native American community, getting more than, I believe, 88% in 90% plus Native American precincts. Under the old Legislative District 2, that candidate received 78.7% of the vote. Old Legislative District 2 was underpopulated, had to grow, so it's not possible to maintain that level. Under the draft map, that vote was 68.4%, and under this version 2 that we got today, it goes down slightly to 66.9%. So still a very strong ability to elect, although down slightly.
Can you scroll up to 1?
Yes.
And that's due to the change of Greenlee County and 8,400 people, right?
Correct. So basically the changes to Legislative District 1 and Legislative District 5 are Legislative District 1 picked up the population of Greenlee County. Legislative District 5 picked up the population of the Arizona Strip. They did not lose anything in this change. It's just adding more in. I can also tell you the splits quickly. So there was a few more split census tracts, block groups, reservations, and tribal subdivisions with this change. If you'd like to look at the competitiveness also, you can see that District 1 came slightly less Republican, although it's probably a fairly non-competitive seat. District 5 came slightly more Republican, but again, probably not very competitive. District 6 became about a point to a point, 1.3% more Democratic, making it slightly more competitive. Using Index 2, District 6 has a Republican percentage of 54.1 after this change, and a Democratic percentage of 45.9. That's a little bit closer to 50-50 from 55.4 Republican, 44.6 Democrat. And then District 7 becomes about a point to a point and a half less Democratic. Again, that's probably not a change we necessarily like to see, but as Ken mentioned, it's still very safe in the ability to elect. And then the last chart showing where the populations come from. I'm not sure what these all looked like before, but once you have the printed out copy, you can can study those for yourself. Are there other questions about this change report, or should we go back to the map? Or we also haven't fully explored ways, I guess, for Commissioner Freeman to add more population into District 7 so that that Sholo and Pine Top, or that Sholo and Linden can remain in District 6 with this change.
Any comments or questions on this change report?
Madam Chair, so it looks like the population, the addition of population to CD1 is actually a good thing. Not CD1, LD1.
It is a good thing based off of the deviation from the draft map. However, when we discuss keeping Cochise County whole and adding Green Valley in, that'll add more population to that legislative district also, which might take you too high.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Do we want to talk about the voting rights part of it?
Madam Chair, yes. With looking at the change reports that are on the screen, let's look at some of the metrics. Willie, could you please scroll down to District 7? Let's look at some of the significant figures and comparing them with the benchmark. The total minority population in the proposal that's on the screen is higher than the benchmark. The minority VAP is higher than the benchmark. I don't have figures for, Ken, do you have the figures under the benchmark for the Native American total population and VAP, please? So those figures are higher. I think let's talk, if we could, about the municipalities. With Willie, in the proposal that's on the screen, this keeps Winslow in draft LD7?
Correct.
Okay. I think that, like we were talking about before, with comparing the two populations as far as the racial percentages in each, there's additional consideration. Is one of the reasons in talking about many of the things that have come up is that the Navajo Nation has lost population over the last decade. With Winslow, keeping Winslow in the district, respectfully, I would suggest is beneficial over the next decade, because that potentially insulates the commission and the state from retrogression by effect claims, in other words, accidental retrogression. So if the other metrics are better than the benchmark, or at least the same, the fact that the electoral performance declines marginally is not something that in this configuration concerns me as much as previously, primarily because by keeping Winslow, that is an additional safeguard to population loss over the next decade. What's also significant is that with this proposal by the Navajo Nation, while proposals by Indian nations and minority organizations are not necessarily dispositive for the Department of Justice, because sometimes they can be retrogressive themselves, if a recommendation from a minority group or an Indian nation which they endorse, is not retrogressive, then respectfully, I would suggest that be given consideration. The department would also look at that favorably, in the sense that if you just look at the electoral performance, one of the things that the department would do, if the electoral performance declines marginally as it does on the screen, the department would also view the fact that this has been submitted by the Navajo Nation. The department would call the nation and discuss the changes. Presumably, if the nation endorsed the changes and said that they would support them, then the department would conduct an analysis to confirm, and then if the department determines there's no retrogression, then would proceed. So my sense is that this appears to be non-retrogressive, and retaining Winslow in the district, my belief is significant, so that it does appear to me that this change being endorsed by the nation does not raise any issues that the department would have under Section 5. So respectfully, I would say that, and I want to get the benchmark numbers from Ken, that this does appear to be a change that is salutary and would not be problematic under Section 5. Ken, do you have the numbers?
Yes, I do. It doesn't appear to improve the benchmark from, in the benchmark district, the total Native American population is 58.9% of total population, and of voting age population, 62.9. The voting age population goes up to 63.1 in this proposal, and the total population, Native American, up to 65.9.
Yes, Madam Chair, and I think that just confirms the other benchmark numbers, so that if a specific district has the metrics that either meets or exceeds the benchmark, that is extremely beneficial and is looked favorably upon by the Department of Justice.
Thank you. Any comments from Mr. Strasma?
I believe this change looks good.
Thank you. Any comments from commissioners?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Freeman?
Perhaps not directly on topic, but I was just noticing the U.S. Census Bureau just released the new American Community Survey data. Is that being used, employed by us? Has that been incorporated into our data set?
No, that's not incorporated in these numbers.
Is that something we're going to need to do to incorporate before we make any final submissions?
I do not believe so. The most recent ACS data we've had is from the 07 through 9 rolling American Community Survey data. The ACS is released on a rolling basis, and so there will always be new data, not all of which will be included in our submission. If there's anything new, different, or noteworthy, that would be something we would want to take into account, and I'd defer to Mr. Adelson on if there's anything specific DOJ would look at in that regard.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Freeman, on that point, the ACS data, I agree, it's released on a rolling basis. Some of the data can be relevant, some of the data might not be. If there is particular data, as ACS continues to roll out information that's relevant to the submission, certainly that would be something to consider. One of the things that the ACS does that is not necessarily in the regular census data might relate to, example, language proficiency, which wouldn't necessarily be determinative with what we're doing. But I certainly agree with Mr. Strasma that if information is disclosed by ACS over the next period of time until the submission is made, we can certainly determine if any of that data would be relevant for the submission.
Other comments from other commissioners? Ms. McNulty?
Hello. I like that Greenlee and Graham counties would be combined in Legislative District 1. I think that's a very positive step. I know we can't do everything. This is a balancing act, but that would be another advantage of this proposal. I think that someone sent us last night the testimony of Mr. Titla from the San Carlos Apache Nation, and also his reference to Mr. Lupe's desire that Shola remain in the district with the Native American district. So I think this would satisfy that request. And looking at the competitiveness number, which is important to me, I see that it's the same as in what I had proposed. It's still a Republican district, but it's closer than it might have been, and I appreciate that has been taken into consideration in the proposal also.
Yes, thanks to Mr. Herder, we received the excerpt on those comments from December 5th. It's very helpful, thank you. And we also have this letter from the Hopi tribe today, dated December 8th, from Chairman Shingotawa, and he specifies that the tribe does not want to see Winslow moving into LD6, so. And I also agree with the comment on Greenlee. That seems to make a lot of sense, and we'll have to see what happens down in the corner once we deal with the tail. But for now, it definitely seems like a positive move in the right direction, so. So, any other further thoughts on this? Do you have something? I see you moving, and I think you're going to talk.
I'm just playing with my...
Okay.
I guess my thought would be to move this forward for further analysis at this point. Incorporate this in our map and have it analyzed.
I would agree. We heard both from Mr. Strausman and Mr. Adelson. It seems like a positive change, and without objection, I would propose moving this forward for additional analysis as well.
Madam Chair, I'm all for continuing further analysis at every step of the game, but I just want to make clear I don't agree that those should be the final lines. I still want to study it and look at, I noticed that we've now got it on the website, so I'd like to continue to look at this area of the state.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and move forward for additional analysis on this proposed change report. Anything else from our mapping consultant on this that you need from us?
On this, no, since we did just get it recently, I don't have all the files ready for the website. I'd like to go through, just make sure I followed the line and don't have any unassigned census blocks or non-contiguous areas. I might need to clean it up just ever so slightly. I doubt that would affect any population, but more just be a geographic thing. Depending on what the schedule is for today, if we have a break for lunch, or if we adjourn sometime, I will try to get this stuff done today and post it to the website as soon as possible. I also think it'd be good if we are looking at any other changes, specifically the one to Cochise County, to use this as the baseline. So perhaps rerunning change reports with this as the starting point. But again, that'll take some time. So on this, I will just make sure that what we have is correct, and then we'll use this as the new kind of working map that will be submitted to Dr. King for analysis.
Okay. So do we want to move to the next LD change report?
Okay. The other one we've prepared today is the changes to Legislative District 26. Heard some public testimony about this today. Just to bring everyone back up to speed, what's happened here is that Legislative District 26 has given up some population in the Dobson Ranch area and in Tempe and Mesa. It's picked up population from District 27 in Guadalupe and slightly in Tempe. District 27 has picked up population then in the Maricopa County portion of the Gila River Reservation. And there's been a population balancing between districts 17 and 18. So again, the green line is the old map. In this case, if you'll notice on your change report, for the first time at the top when it says old map, it's the ledge working map, December 8th, 2011. So this map does have those changes that were submitted for analysis yesterday included in them. So just a note there. That doesn't really affect anything here. But the green line is the working map, and in this case is the draft map. You can see there is a change in where the population between 17 and 18 is balanced. The district used to run like this. I'll turn on the census place so you can see that. In Chandler there, in order to balance population, it's a little bit cleaner, I think, now. Just goes more north-south. Guadalupe went into District 26. And the difference between what's happening here and what happened yesterday is that, and Buck, can I get a laser pointer? Is that possible? Is this portion, I'll use my cursor, right here is also included in District 18 now. Are there questions about this, or? I believe you all have the change report from today that discusses what happens here. Significantly, District 26 becomes about 2.8% higher total minority population. The Hispanic registration in District 26 goes up by 2.9%. Hispanic citizen voting age population goes up by 1.5 points. The voting age total minority goes up by 2.6%. And then all of the indicators of elections are improved by anywhere from 1 point to 2 points.
And that also satisfies the request we had from the Dobson Ranch folks, right?
Yes, it does. That was just kind of a happy accident, but
we like those.
Yeah.
Do legal counsel have any comments on Guadalupe in light of the comments this morning?
Madam Chair, Commissioner McNulty, yes. One of the things that's very important to remember, and I think that sometimes it's very difficult for many to really appreciate this. Really the only issue for the Department of Justice in Section 5 is retrogression. Now there are connections to retrogression, packing racial minorities, for example, even though that's a Section 2 issue under the Voting Rights Act, can indicate the presence of retrogression. Certainly in redistricting, as we've seen today, there are blocks and groups of people that are assigned to certain districts that are necessary for many, many reasons. So that I certainly can appreciate, because I've been looking at redistricting for 11 years, that moving populations around is not always something that pleases everybody. From the Department of Justice's perspective, the department looks at retrogression. If there is a move that improves, enhances minority voters' opportunities to elect and reduces any suggestion of retrogression, whether now or in the future, that's something that is quite relevant and very important to the department. So that in looking at the changes on the change report, I certainly agree that the changes in draft 26 are very positive. Even though the changes in some part may seem relatively small. I think when you increase total minority population as much as is being done, Hispanic population across the board, Hispanic voting age population, particularly Hispanic HCVAP, Hispanic citizen voting age population, there's almost a 3% increase in Hispanic registration. So I think that the changes are very positive, and I certainly, from a Section 5 perspective, view them as very salutary and beneficial. And were I still with the department, I would certainly view these changes as being positive. If you look at District 27, by contrast, District 27 is a very strong district from what the numbers appear to indicate. If you look at the electoral performance at the bottom of the page, it's a very strong district as far as performance, with the 4 races that are listed as including an individual candidate. All the metrics are very significant, from the mid-60% approval up into the 70s. That's a very powerful district, as shown by the electoral performance indicators. So my opinion is that the change to 26 is very beneficial and would be looked at favorably by the Department of Justice from a Section 5 point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adelson. Any comments, Mr. Strasma?
I agree that the changes are beneficial. We spent a fair amount of time debating how I tried to find a stronger word than necessary. What was the word Mr. Adelson used yesterday?
Essential.
Essential. There was some debate as to whether these changes were necessarily essential, and perhaps because I feel a good case could be made that draft 26 as it exists could be pre-cleared, but obviously Mr. Adelson is the expert on that, so perhaps pass the question back to him of does it meet the essential bar?
Thank you, Mr. Strasbaugh. I always like being put on the spot like that. Yes, and respectfully, in my opinion, the changes are essential. That I certainly agree that previously the district had a lot of strengths. The district has more strengths and resolved several questions for me. So in looking at it from the Justice Department's perspective, the changes appear to be only positive. And to the degree that, as we've been talking about, we can eliminate questions and eliminate, let me back up. Instead of saying eliminate questions, have answers to questions and resolve questions, the more to the benefit to the commission and the state, because then we won't have to deal with situations down the road, as the commission did 9 years ago, where the answers may not satisfy the Department of Justice.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I noticed that on the District 27 report, the Hispanic population has actually increased. And I wonder why that is. And I also think it's important for the record to note that the Maricopa County portion of the Gila River Indian community has been moved into 27 at the request of that community. It doesn't wholly satisfy a request that they made to be split up and tied to metro legislative districts, but it does. It's a compromise, and it does partially satisfy that request, and it was done at their request.
Bear with us for a minute, please.
We actually can hear from the White Mountain Apache tribe right now, if that would work for folks while you're looking that up via phone. Okay, great. It's going to be Mr. Jerry Glochet Jr. Resourceful.
Welcome to Quest Conferencing. Please dial the room number. Press the star key before and please wait for entry into the meeting. If you are the moderator, you are entering the meeting.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello, this is the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission. Is this Mr. Glochet?
Yes, it's kind of muffled. I hope you can hear me, but I got to really tune in to hear you.
Okay, we can hear you really well. Is this Mr. Glochet?
I heard that.
Sorry, is this Mr. Glochet?
Yes, this is Jerry Glochet.
Great. We appreciate you calling in, and you're representing the White Mountain Apache tribe?
Yes, I can do my part on behalf of recall from the last conversation from Chairman officially on Monday on this matter.
Wonderful. Thank you for dialing in, and please feel free to proceed. And if you wouldn't mind spelling your last name for our court reporter, we have somebody transcribing.
Jerry is with the J and it ends with the Y. Glochet is Gloshay. Jr. Jerry Glochet Jr.
Perfect. Thank you. Feel free to go ahead and proceed.
Basically, from what I gather from this morning's conversation on what you are all there for, Chairman Lupi wanted to say that he wanted to have the Independent Redistricting Commission to continue to strive to enhance the Native American voting age population vote for District 7. Not just the general population, but the voting age population of Native Americans within District 7. And that, in addition, he was in favor, and you may have our last letter of the Navajo Nation's proposal, which would entail the native tribes, Hopi, Kaibab, Navajo, White Mountain Apache, and San Carlos. I may be missing some other tribes, but I don't have all of that in front of me. But we wanted to have that and to include the city of Pinetop Lakeside and Shoalo.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Gloshay from the commission? Okay.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate you dialing in. Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks. Okay. Is there anything, I think you were looking into a question that Ms. McNulty had regarding HVAP?
Yes, and I apologize. The change report you have, for whatever reason, did not have one of the changes that was involved in yesterday's. The only thing we intended to do differently than what you looked at yesterday was just to add that little corner of Dobson Ranch. For whatever reason, the portion of Gila River that's in Maricopa County was left out of that District 27. So there is an additional affected legislative district, District number 11, and District 27 is slightly different. It doesn't affect the way that 26, 17, or 18 would look. I do have copies of yesterday's change report if you'd like to see how, basically the portion from yesterday that is in District 11 and District 27 is correct. The portion from today's report that is 17, 18, and 26 is correct. And I'm very sorry about that. So if anybody needs a copy, I do have a few extra I can share with the commissioners if they don't have from yesterday.
Any questions on that?
Basically, you're taking about 3,000 people from the Gila River portion, or the Maricopa portion of the Gila River Reservation, and adding them into District 27. That was something that they asked for. So we're following up on that. It also helps kind of mitigate the population loss to District 27 by giving up Guadalupe to District 26. If you look at today's report and you want to study some of the I guess, voting rights implications of this change, you can look at the effects to Districts 17 and 18. They are, basically what happens is that District 18 takes on a lot of District 26's less than ideal population. That makes District 18 too large, so then District 18 shares some of that burden with District 17. So you'll notice that District 17 and District 18 now have positive population deviations of 3.6 and 4.2% respectively in this change. Are there questions? And I'm sorry for the confusion.
Just so I have this right, so LD 26 version 3, that change report?
Yes.
Should have an additional district in it, is that right, 11?
It should also reflect some changes to District 11 that are fairly minor, but if you're interested in those changes, you can look at those in yesterday's change report,
Right.
of which we do have extra copies.
And those were just handed out in case anybody
Yeah.
didn't have theirs. Okay, any other questions on this? Well, given that Mr. Adelson used the word essential, the buzzword, I would propose we Without objection, move forward to submit this for further analysis. This change report. Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and do that.
Great.
Does that conclude all of our voting rights enhancements?
One more thing back to the Navajo Nation map that was adopted for further analysis. We do now have the hard copy, just so commissioners have that for the records.
Oh, great, of the change report, good.
Madam Chair, I think we submitted LD 24 for analysis yesterday, but given the testimony today from the Fort McDowell Nation, I wonder if we could just discuss the implications of moving that 971 people to LD 23 and get Mr. Adelson's reaction to that.
This would be for LD 24.
I believe it would involve moving 971 Native Americans out of LD 24 into LD 23. And I don't want to set a precedent for rescinding a submittal for analysis, but at the same time, it's such a small change, and it is something that we had discussed yesterday.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, Commissioner McNulty, if Madam Chair, would you like me to comment on that?
That would be great. And these changes, I think, are the ones outlined in the November 1st letter from Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation.
In looking at what the nation talked about today as far as the changes, the change in with the voting age population of about 600 people, the discussion that the HVAP decreases, and forgive me if I don't have the exact number, by I believe it was under 50 people. Moving the nation into 23 and looking at, well, before I get into that, I mean, District 24, as we've talked about, it is important to enhance the district as far as several of the metrics that we've discussed. What I would respectfully suggest is, given the numbers of people that we heard about today that go to the issue of retrogression and the Section 5 review by the Department of Justice, what I would suggest is looking to see that all these numbers match up, so that if the loss is as small as it is, given that it's a Native American population rather than a Hispanic population. The Hispanic population is the majority minority in the district. That makes it less of an issue potentially for the department. So what I would respectfully suggest is that we take the new information that's been given today as far as the specific population, have that confirmed, and if indeed the numbers are as small as indicated, I would respectfully suggest that this would not be something that the department would view negatively, because the change is potentially quite marginal. I mean, one of the things that I would think would be very important is that we'd have to do make sure under the election performance metrics that they don't really change, and if indeed the removal of the nation does not change the electoral performance, then I think that this would not be a Section 5 issue for the department, but certainly for the record and for the due diligence of the commission, as well as to prove to the department that there's no retrogression, either accidental or intentional. Getting that confirmation is very important. If we do have it, as I said, I would respectfully suggest that this would not be a change that would be viewed problematically by the department.
Thank you. So given that, Ms. McNulty, are you suggesting that we propose that additional piece to be considered for further analysis?
Yes, I would make that suggestion.
Are we analyzing two scenarios, one with the Fort McDowell's in and one without?
I would propose only to analyze the scenario in which, assuming the numbers are confirmed, as Mr. Adelson said, we would be analyzing District 24 with the Salt River community in District 24, but the Fort McDowell community moved out into District 23.
If I may, for some additional information on it, although it is a very small in terms of population, because it's more than 90% minority Native American, it does decrease the district's overall total minority percent by about 0.5%. And that was one of the things I wanted to flag for Mr. Anderson. I know that's only one of many things that would be looked at.
Madam Chair, and I appreciate that. That is important information. That's why we need to, we'll run all the numbers. If the electoral performance does not really change, then I think that the department would not necessarily look on the 0.5 decrease as being retrogressive or significant. If, for example, the electoral performances would, let's say, decrease by 1 point or 2 points or 3 points, that would be significant. But assuming that that is not the case, and we'll have the analysis to confirm that, the drop in the minority population would likely not be dispositive as far as the department under the Section 5 analysis.
Just so everyone understands, this is 971 people. Of that, 96.1% are minority, either Hispanic or Native American. Looking at the 2010 mine inspector's race, there was 128 votes cast. 100 of them went for the Hispanic candidate. 28 were cast for the non-Hispanic candidate. Removing this would change District 24's total minority percentage. As of yesterday's change, it was at 54.9%. Removing this would make it, I believe, around 54.5%, 54.4%. So it's about half a percentage point of the district. Minority.
Madam Chair, if I could add on to that, if we look at the changes that we had discussed yesterday, even if the nation is removed, the minority population is still higher than the original draft number. But I'd be interested also, when looking at the electoral performance, to see by contrast the 2010 Secretary of State race as well as the presidential elections, to see how we measure up too, because, and also turnout. If turnout is relatively low in the nation, I mean, that's an important factor too, because that might indicate that this would not have a negative effect on the district as far as Section 5.
The Secretary of State race tracks just about at the same rate as the mine inspector race. The mine inspector Democratic candidate received 100 votes. The Secretary of State race, the Democratic candidate received 102 votes. The Republican received 28 for the mine inspector. Republican received 30 for the Secretary of State.
And Madam Chair, what about the presidential in 08 and 04?
Presidential in 08, the Democratic candidate received 151 votes. The Republican received 64 votes. So about, I guess, 60%.
Mm-hmm. And 08?
That is 08.
Oh, what about 04?
I do not have 04 loaded right now.
Okay. Well, I think in turnout seems to be relatively low. Although the minority candidate of choice is the favored candidate, the number of voters apparently is about 100. So how that factors into all the numbers, we'll get confirmation. But it certainly it appears from what we're talking about that there are not significant blocks of people and numbers of people that would be potentially retrogressive. So as I suggested earlier, once we get all the confirmation of the numbers infused into the change report and see how it looks, if things look as they seem to indicate now, this, in my opinion, does not appear to be an issue that would be a problem for the Department of Justice in the Section 5 review.
Thank you. Other comments?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Strauss.
following up on Commissioner McNulty's, I believe it was, question on if we would be submitting 2 maps, or perhaps it was Commissioner Freeman. My suggestion, because I would like to avoid that, as I've said all along, avoid having more than one working map. It sounds like Mr. Adelson is relatively comfortable with this change, assuming there are no red flags. So perhaps what I would suggest is if the Commission feels this is a change they want to make, that this be adopted and submitted for analysis. We will do some of the quicker analysis that Mr. Adelson was talking about turnout and other elections. Assuming there are no major red flags raised by that, we would go ahead for the more in-depth analysis and have this be part of our working map. If there were any red flags when we discussed the additional numbers with Mr. Adelson this weekend, we would bring that information back to the Commission on Monday.
Madam Chair, I mean, I certainly agree with that, and I think for me, one of the most central numbers is that the number of voters who have voted for the minority candidates of choice all appears to be around 100. That number is just going to be too low to have any district-wide impact. Now, I think that that's also a distinction between this and some of the other things that we've discussed. In the other potential moves and alterations, the numbers were much higher, in the thousands. So when you're talking about 100 people from a turnout perspective, given the size of the district, that's not going to tip the district in any direction.
Thank you. Well, then without objection, I'd propose we go ahead and submit this for further analysis, this particular change.
Okay.
Okay. I think we're going to lose a commissioner right now at 1 p.m.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Freeman?
I apologize. I know I was looking, when Mr. Desmond earlier talked about lunch, I panicked, and that's why I stepped away to talk to Mr. Bledeen, because I was under the understanding our meeting today terminated at 1 o'clock, and I wanted to confirm that I wasn't just imagining that, and he did confirm that commissioners have been told that. And although I was in my office briefly on Monday morning, I have not seen my office since then. And I did, in reliance upon that in time, schedule a few things this afternoon. I just cannot get out of that. So I apologize. I will have, and to the public, I will have to excuse myself.
No problem. Thank you for being here. And are there any other items that, any direction to the mapping consultant that you need from the commission? I just would like to get that before Mr. Freeman leaves, if there is anything.
There was some discussion as the meeting was breaking up yesterday about the Cochise County LD1 situation. My summary would be that we did not find any alternatives that seemed to improve the split. We were looking at narrowing the tail, making the shape seem a little less odd. With that in mind, perhaps the commission would want to direct us to submit for further analysis the change keeping Cochise County whole, and also with one minor amendment that because of some of the changes today that might affect population, that Mr. Desmond might need to look at some suggestions if the population deviation is wider than would be acceptable, and we would come back to you with those on Monday.
Any thoughts from commissioners on that? Mr. Herrera?
When you look at CD1, not only is it an odd-looking, it's legislative district, but it also has a high Hispanic voting age population. I think, in my opinion, too high, and I feel like we need to address that issue with that arm that extends out into Cochise. That maybe we can do away with that, and then I think look at some of Mr. Strasma's recommendations with all the changes we made. We may be able to fix that. So I think that's something it's worth looking into.
Okay, any other comments on that?
Can you tell us what the deviation is right now with the addition of Greenlee County? Just so we can be thinking about how significant an issue it is and thinking over the weekend about whether and how we would want to address it.
I'll, so District 1, if you were to keep Cochise County whole, keep everything else about it same, has a positive deviation of 3,330. If we add in Greenlee County, that deviation will go to 11,776, or 5.52%. That'd be the total.
11,776?
11,776.
Okay.
A positive deviation of 5.52%.
Madam Chair, Mr. Adelson, can we justify the deviations in non-majority minority districts that result from changes to majority minority districts? I mean, is that, I'm not familiar enough with that case law. I know it's not a Department of Justice issue, but.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McNulty, in deviating from the absolute equivalency, typically courts will look at whether you have a rational basis for doing so. So a non-rational basis, of course, would just be putting population and dumping them into the district, so to speak, without consideration for all the factors that you have to consider. So having a deviation in approximately the 5% range, if that is done in part to satisfy the Voting Rights Act, would likely not be considered problematic by a court. What's also true, as I said, from the federal perspective, having a deviation anyway around the 5%, around 5% is arguably not problematic. Is even under the Larios v. Cox case, although that court said that the 10% accepted deviation was probably not acceptable anymore, the court did not pinpoint what would be. 5% is something that I typically recommend as my benchmark in working with local jurisdictions with redistricting. So ordinarily, I think 5%, all things being equal, would be okay.
Thank you. So we aren't too far off here, and I guess I'd just like to put on the record that the deviation that Mr. Desmond just described is a result of a change that was made at the request of the Navajo Nation to improve the minority-majority district LD7.
Any other comments on this? Okay, so we want to go ahead and explore this idea over the weekend, and so you'll come back on Monday and let us know what we might do here. Is that correct?
We could, I guess I'd ask for clarification, is this, at least the LD2 portion, something that we would want to make part of our working map going forward and submit for further analysis this weekend?
The LD2 piece?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Madam Chair, just
I would.
I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. You're talking about the arm that extends into Cochise?
Right. So,
And
so
see-
what's outlined in green is the existing draft map. And so under the proposed change, LD2 would stop at the Cochise County border, and Cochise would be entirely in LD1.
Sure, I would love to see that. And I know, I have a lot of respect for Mr. Adelson, and I know sometimes he can be a little cautious, maybe sometimes hyper cautious, if I can use that word. It's a new word now. But I just don't like the way that looks. It really is an ugly district, and it also, like I said, it does, in my opinion, pack Hispanics into District 2. So, in affecting other districts surrounding it. So I want to make sure that we look at it extensively and come up with a better solution.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Herrera, I take the hyper cautious. I'm going to tell my wife that, see what she has to say. I think that as we talked about yesterday, I think I'm very open to moving forward and seeing what the analysis shows and then going on from there. And certainly in discussing this with Mr. Canefield, although we have questions about that, let's see what the analysis shows, and if the analysis resolves the questions, then so be it. Because I think that what is very important, I think it's very incumbent upon me to make the point for the record, is that we're doing these analyses to not only help the Commission in the state of Arizona satisfy its burden of proof, but also make clear that these issues are not being done to retrogress or discriminate. That it's very important that the record reflect that in going forward with analysis that satisfies that concern. So I'm certainly with you as far as let's see what the analysis shows, and if that can resolve the questions, then so be it.
Okay, any additional direction we need to provide to the mapping consultant? Okay. Anything else that commissioners wanted to raise on proposed adjustments to either the legislative or congressional maps? For the weekend?
Chair,
Ms.
Mr.
McNulty?
Strasman, do you have enough to do this weekend? We could.
We could probably find something to do.
Okay, I'll withhold any further comment until Monday.
And in addition to some of the mapping work we have laid out, there was a request for another look at some of the competitiveness indexes, removing outliers. So we'll have that prepared for Monday.
And was there the item from Mr. Adelson on comparing to benchmark just side by side?
Yeah, and that is something we had shared with Mr. Adelson this morning, and I do have copies for the commissioners. Thank you for reminding me, Madam Chair. The bottom line on this is our draft congressional districts do look very good compared to the benchmarks. They exceed or equal the benchmarks in all but one measure, and that measure being the vote for mine inspector in 2010 in the Maricopa district, which went from 68.7% to 66.9%. So still, over 2/3 of the vote in 2009, a very slight decrease. Every one of the other measures went up. So it certainly seems, to my judgment, like there is no danger that these could be viewed as retrogressive. I don't know, as Mr. Adelson wants to expand further.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, I agree. The measurements all exceed the benchmark except for the two that Mr. Strasman mentioned, but I don't view those as being problematic. The differential between the mine inspector race in the draft and the benchmark is pretty insignificant, in my opinion. The Hispanic population is the other distinction. Yeah, the Hispanic population is the same as it is under the benchmark, so that's not problematic. So I think, as Mr. Strasman and I had communicated this morning, for purposes of the Commission's full information and for the submission, seeing how the two districts measure up in the other elections is important. But certainly with the information that we have here, I agree that there seems to be no Section 5 issue, and all the metrics seem very positive compared to the benchmark.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
It seems like we're getting closer and closer with the congressional map in terms of, especially with the majority minority districts. Do you see us moving forward and trying to not necessarily finalize or vote on the map, but at least get to it as close as a finished product as possible, and then concentrate our efforts on the legislative map?
I haven't made a decision in that regard. I'd open that to other commissioners and their thoughts. There may be some value to decoupling those two and moving forward to get the congressional one going out the door, but there also may be value in treating them in tandem. So I'm still open to whatever people think.
Madam Chair, I didn't mean to vote on the congressional map and approve it before we do the legislative map. I think it would serve us well if we approve both of them at the same time. And send them out the door at the same time. But I think that doesn't stop us from trying to get as close to a finished product on the congressional side.
I see what you're saying. So focusing just on congressional, now that these voting rights districts are going out the door for further analysis. Okay. We can talk about that on Monday and see what folks think about that. I'm open to just sticking with congressional initially, and getting that, any adjustments that people want to make, start looking at those and talking about them next week. So we'll see what Mr. Sturts and Mr. Freeman say too about that. Other comments? Okay, well, thank you all for your help with these voting rights districts. They're very tricky, and we appreciate this additional analysis, and we hope, just to reiterate what Mr. Herrera said earlier, if we can encourage them to do the analysis as soon as possible on these, that would be great.
We will be burning the midnight oil this weekend.
All right, thank you. Thank Dr. King for us too. So I have three more request to speak forms, and I believe that's about it on the agenda. So just making sure. Mr. Bladeen summarized his executive director's report yesterday. I don't know if there's anything new that you wanted to add. Okay, so we're good with that. Review and discussion of possible future agenda items. Anybody have anything they wanted to add that we haven't already talked about? Our next meeting is Monday morning. I'm forgetting where. Is it here? This room? So at the Fiesta Inn? Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, and we start at what time on Monday? We're standing by.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Is Tuesday the 13th? I think, or is it the... You know, I will not be, I'm going to do my best to make it back. I'm going to be in Tucson that day in a meeting, and I don't know if I'll be able to make it back in time, and if Commissioner McNulty won't be back from Boston, I want us to either limit or to maybe not meet at all, because I want one of us to be here.
That's a good
Right,
point.
well-
I'm sorry, but I will try and attend by phone on Monday, but I will not be able to attend at all on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, I was going to be chairing the meeting from Tucson,
Correct.
so I don't know if it makes sense to have us in one location and have Mr. Sturts and Mr. Freeman up here. What do you all think?
Madam Chair, the only thing is my meeting will be taking up the majority of my time, and I don't know if I'll be able to break away to come to the IRC meeting, either if it's in Tucson or if I drive here in time. So that's the problem. I'll do my best to do one or the other, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Is there any possibility we could meet Friday next week instead of Tuesday?
I can quickly go back and check on what was submitted to us for Friday, whether there was a conflict. I think someone was unavailable all day, but it just take me a minute to pull out the sheet.
And maybe you could check in with Commissioners Freeman and Sturts and just see what they say too about that in terms of a swap between Tuesday and Friday. Or I'm happy to continue to chair the meeting from Tucson if they'd prefer to keep the meeting for Tuesday, but, yeah, we do need bipartisan representation, and we know Ms. McNulty isn't gonna be there, so, and it sounds like Mr. Herrera is gonna be predisposed. So you,
Okay, right, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, we'll check with Commissioner Sturtson Freeman on the possibility of a Friday, Tuesday swap.
Okay.
I think it may have been Friday that Commissioner Sturts wasn't available, but we're trying to pull that up now to see. But we'll ask and get back to all of you via email. I guess the one question when we're talking about scheduling is, what do you think you want to do for the week after next? Do you want to wait and later next week tell me what you want to do to send out information and requests? But right now we have nothing scheduled beyond Saturday the 17th.
right, I think that you should check with all the commissioners and see what their availability is, just to,
For the next 2 weeks?
yeah,
Okay.
that would be good. And what time are we starting tomorrow, Buck?
9:30.
9:30. I mean,
Sorry.
Monday.
Monday, Madam
We're not
Chair,
meeting
not-
Saturday or Sunday this week.
We do, the last information we had, which of course a couple weeks old, is that Commissioner Freeman was not available from like 9:30 till 3 on Friday, and Commissioner Sturts was not available at all on Friday.
Okay.
So we'll double check with them.
That would be
in
great.
case something's changed, but it looks like it'll be hard to change to Friday at this point.
And Wednesday too, I think, was a day that,
We had no meeting on Wednesday. Let's see. Commissioner Sturts was unavailable all day, and Commissioner Freeman is available only in the morning.
so
We
there's a
could potentially
possibility
do-
of a,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I was going to say, I guess we could potentially do a morning meeting on Wednesday. And I know that Commissioner Sturts has tried to, if possible, rearrange his schedule to attend those meetings he can. Well, it's not desirable. I know we have had meetings with 4 commissioners.
Okay. Mr. Herrera, are you available Wednesday morning?
Madam Chair, I had sent all my dates or times that I wasn't available to Ms. Gomez, so I don't have my calendar with me, but I've given her all the dates.
Okay, so we had initially planned on not meeting Wednesday and Friday of next week, but we may decide to meet Wednesday morning. So we'll confirm with Commissioners Freeman and Sturts, and then I don't think you'll be able to make that, right? You'll be traveling? Yeah, so I don't know that we'll have Ms. McNulty, but if we have Commissioner Herrera, that would be great.
And that
So
would
just
be
let us
for
know. Wednesday.
Wednesday. And then on Tuesday, do you want to still do Tuesday? The one you'd be doing telephonically, or is this a trade?
We're looking at the Tuesday, Friday option to see if
Okay,
we
I'm
can swap Tuesday
okay.
for Friday.
Okay.
But
Right.
we'll just have to see. It's really hard with without everybody here.
We'll resend out memos for everybody so we can get it together for you, and we'll get it worked out.
That'd be great.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
The Tuesday meeting, was it scheduled all day? What was the start time and the end time?
I think the start was the
3
afternoon.
o'clock to 9 was the Tuesday meeting. December 13th was 3 p.m. to 9, and there'd been and then the chair would be participating by telephone on Tuesday the 13th.
Madam Chair, if the meeting is truly ending at 9 o'clock and starting at 3, which I'm surprised we have that late of a start time, but I guess it'll work out for me this time around. I may be able to be back in town to start the meeting possibly a little later. But if we can meet, if we're gonna meet that late anyway, there's nothing stopping us from starting a little later, and so I can make the meeting and still meet on Wednesday. So it'd be maybe from 5 to 9
Do you mean on Tuesday?
on Tuesday.
It's fine with me. I don't know about Commissioners Sturts and Freeman, so.
Okay. We'll ask via email or phone.
And you'd be participating from Phoenix?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, out of curiosity, why such a late start time on Tuesday at 3 o'clock?
I have a meeting
Oh.
from 1:30 to 2:30.
I apologize, I didn't know, okay.
So we could have done morning, but
I think we had conflicts in the morning
Yeah.
with other schedules.
complicated. Complicated.
So, Madam Chair, if everything, if it ends up working out, that we can start the Tuesday meeting a little later, maybe at 5, I'm willing to go as however long it takes to finish our business that day.
Okay.
If it takes till 9 o'clock, I'm fine.
Great, and Mr. Bladine will check with the
Yes.
other two commissioners.
If it's after 5. So Monday's okay, Tuesday we'll look at after 5 or switching with Friday depending upon, and then we'll check availability on Wednesday with
Right.
the two Commissioner Sturts and Freeman.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
But Madam Chair, we should probably still try to meet on Friday, in addition to Wednesday. I think we currently don't have a meeting scheduled next Friday, is that correct?
That's right.
That's because we had one commissioner not available all day, one commissioner available not after 3:30, and another commissioner that was not available 9:30 to 3. So we had a bunch of conflicts on Friday the 16th.
Can we get
We can
one Republican, one Democratic commissioner, and obviously the independent together? If we can, I think it's worth meeting, even if it's in the morning. I think the most important thing is that we have at least a representative from each of the parties. I think obviously we would prefer all 5, but I think the Madam Chair would probably agree that at least having one representative would be not ideal, but the second best choice.
Yes, no, we've talked about that as if there's bipartisan representation available.
We'll double check that, but right now we show that Commissioner Sturts would not be available and Commissioner Freeman wouldn't be available from 9:30 till 3. And then we have another commissioner not available after 3:30.
Yeah, that's right. I have an evening thing, I think, right,
So
that night?
I think that's why
in Tucson, but yeah, I'm available all the way.
We'll send it all out
all
to
day.
you so you can see it again in a typed up sheet and make some suggestions, and then you can give us feedback. That makes sense?
Yeah, that does.
I might also mention, we sent out notices for next week for the meetings, and we have posted them. There's no problem. We can always change that. But we're still learning our days of the week with the numbers, so we had to revise it twice to get both days right. So if you happen to get complaints, yes, we don't know the days of the week, but we'll try to do better.
Okay. And I asked yesterday for all the commissioners to check their schedules for that Monday, the 19th, too, just to see. But you're going to go out and talk to them about that whole week, just to see what's available. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, I don't think there's anything for number 7 today, legal advice.
No, Madam Chair, there's been no update. We're just
Thank
still
you,
awaiting
Joe.
the ruling.
Thank you. So that leaves us with our residual public comment, and right now I have 3 requests to speak forms. And we'll start with Andy Lockridge from the city of Maricopa in Pinal County. And to remind everyone to please spell your last name for our court reporter when you come up to address us.
His last name is Lockridge, L-O-C-K-R-I-D-G-E. And thank you, Madam Chair and Commission, for being allowed to speak. I have a question, and I'm a little confused, so maybe you could help me out. I'm looking at the handout that I got, and it has a commission-approved legislative draft map. And then I understand that there is a proposed one that's different from that. Is that correct?
We've been talking about some proposed adjustments to the draft map. nothing has been approved or finalized, but there is a working map that our mapping consultant is moving forward with so that
Is it
we aren't using
possible
multiple.
that we can see a map up on the screen of what that would look like?
Mr. Strasma?
Yes, we can bring the working map up now, and also for the gentleman's benefit and anyone watching online, as these tentative changes are put forward, they're reflected on the working map, which is up on the ARC website under the maps section. There's a maps proposed changes. There's a working map section, and just to reiterate, none of these have been adopted, but these are the proposed changes that are being incorporated going forward.
Yeah, I was just looking a little bit ago to try and bring it up on the computer. I couldn't find it anyplace, so that may have been my issue, but I was just curious what it looked like. My point is that as part of Pinal County is a rapidly growing county. It's historically agricultural and mining, and my understanding is that there's a proposal out there that would lump us with Tucson, and that would be kind of like mixing oil and water. Tucson is very different in terms of its demographic and interests from what the rest of what Pinal County is. Tucson is in Pima County, and we really don't have a lot in common with that. So I would urge that if there is a proposal floating around out there to combine the districts in Tucson and Pinal County, that would be rejected. The current proposal I have in front of me is great because Pinal County and its interest stays and it have common interests, but if we go into Tucson, then that's a very different picture, and so I would urge the Commission to reject any proposal that's considered in that regard. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Ann Hines, representing Self and Sholo residents.
I am not Ann Hines, but I am Jim Jordan speaking in her place.
And if you'll spell your last name, that would be great.
Jordan. Ann was going to read a letter from Terry Hill and Joyce Hill, both of Sholo. To the chairman and members of the commission, having spoken on the issue of the meetings held at Honda Convention Center, White Mountains Apache Reservation on 2 separate dates, and once at the Eager meeting, I wish to reiterate the need to keep the rural congressional districts as compact as much as possible, and that communities of interest be of primary consideration. Unlike the current map outlining the new District 1, which no congressman can manage, what you have done to District 1 was not what we asked for. You need to keep the counties intact and not destroy the integrity of the district. Number 2, the proposed new legislative districts 6 and 7 divides Navajo County without consideration of the communities of interest and compactness. We had suggested that the current LD5 with a slight modification would have been acceptable. The map as drawn is not a good alternative, and it separates the communities within the Navajo and Apache counties, where both close ties have existed since before statehood. It would appear that you have disregarded what the people of LD5 proposed. It also appears that the commission is under the influence of special interest groups and not acting in the best interest of the citizens of Arizona. Sincerely, Terry Hill and Joyce Hill. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lynn Breyer, representing Self and residents of Sholo.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm actually going to read 2 letters, and then I would like to hand them in for the record. The first one is from William R. Farrow in Sholo. That is spelled F-A-U-R-O-T. And by the way, my name is B-R-E-Y-E-R. This letter is dated December 6th and reads as follows. I personally attended 2 hearings of the ARC. The commission listened politely. The speaker speaking to the commission stressed that the existing districts were compact communities of interest with similar rural values. Navajo County is distinctly different from Flagstaff, which has an urban character. The reservations have their own governments and societies quite different from the Anglo populations. At the first meeting, I noted that no data was presented by the Commission to support any map. At the second meeting, the Commission presented one table showing minority populations, but no data supporting the other higher level criteria. At each meeting, only a few spoke for the lowest level criteria, competitiveness. It is apparent that the Commission was not independent in following its own guidelines, but instead pandered to the Native Americans who did not have enough population to form their own district unless some Anglos were disenfranchised in the process. All this was done without any statistical support. This gerrymandered map was done by 5 appointees. The result was a perfect example of gerrymandering. The AIRC should be eliminated. The ideal of independence is a sham. Better to let the legislature hammer out the details. Commissioners are human and therefore fallible. And the next letter is from Janet Reynolds, also of Show Low. This also is dated December 6th. Reads as follows. My name is Janet Reynolds, and I live in Show Low, Arizona. I attended 3 different redistricting meetings, and it was very obvious that the redistricting committee was listening politely to the statements being made by the presenting citizens, but that the decision on the redistricting had already been made. Approximately 95% of approximately 95% of the citizens and city officials speaking were presenting their request to have communities of interest as the top priority for consideration in the redistricting of Arizona. However, this was totally ignored, as in our case from Show Low to the Indian casino called Honda at the southernmost end of Highway 260. No, I'm sorry, I've missed a line again. This is all very closely typed. However, this was totally ignored, as in our case, the redistricting map split Show Low from our closest neighboring towns of Pinetop Lakeside. I believe you have corrected that. Is that correct? In a modification you've made?
We're working on that area.
Okay. If you drove south from Show Low to the Indian casino called Honda at the southernmost end of Highway 260, you would be totally unaware where the town of Show Low left off and the towns of Lakeside Pinetop began. This is one contiguous area sharing churches, business, recreation areas, etc. Yet the Redistricting Commission saw fit to divide them into 2 different districts. We are all aware of the chairwoman's late-night behind-the-door drawing of the proposed maps and then forcing a vote early the next morning. This was done prior to the completion of all the hearings. What a sham. I and the citizens of Arizona feel that once again it is being done unto us instead of for us. I would like the committee to prove that communities of interest was the top priority for the proposed redistricting maps. This would be hard to prove, but must be proved. The way the current map is drawn, communities of interest cannot be proved, as evidenced by the dividing of Show Low and Pinetop Lakeside. We are communities in the White Mountains of Arizona and have totally different needs and interests from those who live in the metropolitan areas or on the reservations. This redistricting process is a total disservice to all the people who took the time to attend the various redistricting meetings, and we wonder why people don't take the time to become involved. When people do make the effort to give input, the officials just shoot them down and then goes ahead and does what the officials had wanted to do originally. There needs to be a complete justification for the decision as to why the proposed adopted maps were drawn as they were, as they definitely do not reflect the communities of interest that were reflected in the hearings. What a sham. Janet Reynolds. Can I hand this to somebody for the record?
Yes, Mr. Bladine. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Our next speaker is Jay Prescott, representing Self from Arizona City.
Yes, well, you've put us in a district with Saddlebrook and Maricopa, and gerrymandered this thing around to where Pete Ruiz is guaranteed to win is District 1. And we should be in with, we're just only 3 miles away. And you've got us in with places that are 50 to 100 miles away from us. And it's pathetic what you're doing to us. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Are there any other people that wanted to address the commission today? That was my last request to speak form. Okay. Well, that brings us to the last item on the agenda, which is adjournment, and the time is 1:39 p.m. Thank you all for coming and providing input today. This meeting is adjourned.